Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Monday, January 23rd, 2023 City Council work session of the City of Bel Air Beach. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Patty, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Frank Bankert.
Present.
Councilmember Belinda Livingstone.
Present.
Councilmember Leslie Notero.
Here.
Councilmember Lloyd Roberts.
Present.
Councilmember Mike Zabel.
Here.
Mayor Dave Gaddis.
Here.
City Manager Kyle Riefler.
Here.
City Attorney Randy Mora.
Present.
And Vice Mayor Jody Shirley has not yet arrived.
Thank you very much, Patty. Before we begin, I would like to set a time limit on the meeting for no later than 9 p.m. During these work sessions, 3 hours, we're all burned out, we're just ready to get out of here. So we have, even though there's only 6 mentioned agenda items, they're pretty aggressive. I figure by the time 9 o'clock rolls around, we'll be ready for a break. Also, if anyone needs a break between now and 9 p.m., please just let me know. Right? With that being said, let's just move right over to item number 1, which is discussion of proposed ordinance regarding comprehensive sign regulations. This was placed on the agenda by City Attorney Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was brought back to this workshop not because of any action taken by the Office of the City Attorney, but in the spirit of continuing the stated goal of revising your sign code some months ago. This was presented to you with some introduction, though it is admittedly lengthy, and the council requested more time to digest it, determine if it had feedback, as this was generated sort of as a top-down approach when you folks had interviewed my firm and other firms, and upon our being hired, it was communicated that revisiting your sign code to make it compliant with the following the Supreme Court jurisprudence in Reed v. Gilbert and other cases, that this was a priority. And so we prioritized it accordingly and provided a draft, absent direct input or guidance on what you were looking to address or what issues might exist in your community. Our firm has done this for a few communities in Pinellas County, and we used, I would not say a cookie-cutter template, but one designed to your community based on previous drafts. At this stage, it was brought back with hopes that there may be some guidance and direction. Ultimately, you 5, 6, 7 at any given time, but that this council are the policymakers. I will tell you what legally we need to change. Legally, what you cannot do is treat temporary speech in a content-based manner. Ordinarily, that made sense to us, where we said, okay, we can't say if you're pro this issue, you get a bigger sign or a smaller sign. But in the mid-teens, around 2015 or 2016, there was a Supreme Court case that said, oh, no, when you characterize a temporary sign by its content, election signs, for example, non-commercial directional signs, this way to the church, this way to the 5K, come join our festival. Those are also content-based restrictions, and you can't do that. And so it fundamentally upended how a lot of sign codes were written in the United States, and in fact, the dissent in that case made that very clear, that this is going to mean fundamentally changing most local regulations on signs. And so that's what this reflects. The way most communities have adapted to that is to have restrictions based on size, number, etc., with the understanding that if you limit the number of temporary non-commercial signs, that extends to what we mean for your campaign signs in a year where you have, a presidential election, a local election, a ballot measure. If you're saying you only get 3 temporary signs, you're capping it. So understanding what that means, big picture. And so ultimately we've gone through, we've harmonized this with the way your code is presently laid out, and we welcome any input, feedback you may have. Absent additional in addition to any line edits or concerns you may have about the draft, excuse me, in addition to any line edits or concerns you may have about the draft, I wish to underscore again that the 7 of you are the policymakers. As I said in a memo to another community recently, you are free to accept, reject, add to, delete from, modify, amend what is before you. This is given to you for the purpose of stimulating a substantive discussion on the issue and allowing you to move forward. The process from here, if you do approve it, ultimately your planning and zoning board will have to look at this as a change in the land development regulations, and it would come before you on a first and second reading. As you all well know at this point, we're not changing the rules tonight. We're just trying to get a product that will ultimately get us there.
Thank you very much. Patty, please make a note of 604.
Yes, sir.
Vice Mayor Shirley Ryan.
Yes.
So I went through this, Mr. Mora, and I assumed that everywhere there's yellow marking. That is where it's up to the council to decide, is this an acceptable number? Would you like it higher? Would you like it lower? What would you like to do? To expedite this process, overall, it's way too much information, obviously, but from a legal perspective, I'm sure it has to be this way because there are so many legal loopholes. What I would like to ask you to do is, everywhere there's one of these yellow highlights, can we just jump to it? You give a quick explanation for it and what it is you're looking for, and then we'll go around the council and we'll try to knock these out.
Sure, and that is mostly a very accurate reflection. This was the yellow highlights as policymakers were to highlight. This is where your regulatory ability on this is highest, right? I want to make sure you see that numbers were not put in there by legal. And you don't say, oh, well, it used to be 15 feet, but legal said it had to be 17. No, that's totally you folks, and we used some numbers from your code, some numbers from others, and if there's a number in there you don't like, by all means change it. To the extent anything has to be in here, the whereas clauses, while lengthy, are done to bolster the possibility of a future defense. I'm not going to represent to you that you absolutely must have them or we can't pass this. I do want to make that clear that I respect your authority as the policymakers in that regard. So with that, I'm pulling up the ordinance at the moment, Mr. Mayor. I had it in hard copy, but I want to make sure I'm pulling up the digital so I can more quickly get to the highlighting. So with that, I don't need any guidance on the ordinance number.
Page 12 is the first one.
Thank you. The first one is abandoned or discontinued sign or structure. A sign or structure is considered abandoned or discontinued when its owner fails to operate or maintain a sign for a period of at least, it's presently 60 days. This is really targeted towards most especially where you have that, and we've all seen this, especially following the recession, that major business in your community. Again, in your community, you don't really have a business district, but let's say, to the extent you have the condominiums, a building gets destroyed post some unfortunate natural disaster, and then that sign sits there for another 5 years because, yes, they technically own the property and they're not doing anything with it. What is an abandoned sign, and what are the regulations that flow from that? So with that in mind, 60 days was a number. If you have a number that you wish differently or an opinion on the matter, by all means, please let us know.
The 60 days was fine to me, but I have a question going through it, is that how soon, once you hit the 60 days, we should have in there at that point, we declare it, I guess, there's a term. How long do they have to remove it? Saying you hit 60 days, we make a statement, and then now you have 2 weeks to remove said sign.
So, my hesitation is only to explain first how code enforcement typically works, because there's the notion that you are in violation of our code versus when you actually comply or when we get some kind of order of compliance. Because let's say we deem a sign abandoned and I have to revisit some element of this, what requirements extend, because this is just the definition section. What obligations flow from that. So,
No, if we'll address it later on.
But I think it is in the code thereafter. But let's say the code says that an abandoned sign that says signs that are deemed abandoned, prohibited signs, under 86.4. So on page 26 of this is where that flows to. And it says that signs that are deemed abandoned under this chapter that do not conform with the provisions of this section shall be removed by the property owner within 30 days after receipt of notification, which will immediately follow the 90-day, and that would have to harmonize that 90-day abandonment period described in this chapter. That such removal is required. So they would get 90 days once deemed removed. 30 days from that notice. But let's say they don't. That doesn't mean on day 31 the city hires a hauling company and we take it away. It means they're in violation of the code. They're going to get a hearing date. They're going to go before a magistrate. The magistrate's going to say, come into compliance by X date. If they don't, then they'll get a fine for every day past that day. And if they continue to ignore it, the fine accrues. So there's this unsatisfying result on some level where somebody says, I thought they had to remove that thing in 90 days. It's still sitting out there and it's been 6 and 7 months. What's going on here, city? Well, there's a fine accruing in the background, and then that we can potentially get a lien for that and all those, every other manner of legal result. But the idea that we're going to show up with our own hauling company and start taking everything on day 91 or 61 or whatever it is not.
Perhaps a note in there, because sometimes, we'll, at least I do, I send out these actual things to the citizens, and somebody's going to come back and, why aren't you? Well, perhaps in a later section going, okay, once you've done this, it goes into the normal flow, which is perhaps
I don't
this.
think it's helpful to codify the code enforcement process in the code.
Oh, no, I understand that.
So in that sense, it's the natural operation of law and due process takes over.
So, yes, go ahead, Mr. Roberts.
I was just going back to page 26, Randy.
Mhm.
So just to make sure I understand the flow, in that example under A, it says a 90-day abandonment period.
I just said I'd harmonize that to the 60 or whatever.
Okay.
You folks pick, but you're right. That
It
was
needs
just,
to be the same number, whatever. Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it.
So if we set this to let's say 30 days, how much time does the property or the sign owner actually have before we can go remove the sign?
we will not be removing the sign absent a court order to that effect.
Okay.
So what would happen is, let's say we have that result, and we have the special magistrate holding they're in violation, and they need to remove it, and we're still not getting satisfaction, then we would have to file an injunctive action in the court as the plaintiff, functionally suing a property owner in the city, and get a court order that they need to remove it or give us the right to cure in that case. And I'm involved in a very similar matter in another community, and it has taken us 10 years, and that structure is still there.
Point taken. Well, let's just kind of go around the room here and see what everyone thinks on this. Councilmember Natera,
Now, we're talking about the 60 days.
60 days.
And I think that's reasonable.
I think that's reasonable. Councilmember Roberts?
I agree. I don't have any problem with that.
So we're going to remove some signs in 60 days, and other signs stay up definitely.
I did not say that, sir.
Well,
The short answer is yes. If somebody has a sign in their front yard that says, "Save all manatees," and it's a temporary sign, we're not going to remove that at any point.
Right.
That's political
how
speech.
does that not conflict with Gilbert's ruling and Thomas's ruling of even-handed distribution of this law? Because I don't want to get into the whole thing. I mean, I would never vote for any of this. I mean,
Okay?
the Supreme Court ruling is crystal clear.
Respectfully disagree, especially with the
Well,
dissents,
it's-
concurrences, and like.
And since 1789, you attorneys can't get together, that's why we have a Supreme Court. And the problem here is, you got, what, 27 pages, 30 pages of the sign ordinance, and it still would be challenged in the court, because you're allowing one person to do this, or one entity to do this, and it can be this big, this small. You're allowed to leave it here for 30 days, you're allowed to leave it here indefinitely.
I think you're jumping way ahead on this.
I'm trying to understand you.
We're just talking about abandoned and discontinued signs.
I understand that, but this is all nonsense, and this is just going to get us into trouble. And this is how attorneys make money, Mr. Mayor. And I would never vote for something like this. ordinance. I would never impose on my residents a 30-page ordinance with a sign.
Point taken.
And I just, as your legal advisor, if it's the majority's will that we do not have an ordinance that reads this way, I'm happy to put it in place, and while I respectfully disagree with the characterization of this, I want to be very clear that none of this is driven by a profit motive. It is driven by a desire to dutifully represent your community in a way that I have responsibly done and would continue to do, but I respect your policy decision to disagree with the proposal, and sir, I would, if the majority of the body wishes to go on the way, I completely respect that and will do so.
Councilmember Zabel.
I agree with 60 days.
Vice Mayor Shirley.
60 days is great with me.
Councilmember Livingstone.
I'm in agreement with 60 days.
60 days, and I'm fine with that also. All right, so 60 days remains.
The next highlighting, Mr. Mayor, is on the bottom of page 13, where it concerns the definition for area of sign. And so the calculation for a double-face sign shall be the area of one face only. Double-face signs shall be so constructed that the perimeter of both faces coincide and are parallel and not more than 24 inches apart. So that's the depth of a sign. If you have a sign that's two-sided, then it can't be, a whole 6 feet on one side and 6 feet on the other, such that you have a cube of the sign. And again, we're just in the definition section.
Both faces coincide and are parallel. I didn't understand this whenever I read it the first time.
The depth separating side one and side two.
This way,
The thickness of the sign.
are they 24 inches apart this
That's-
way?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah, here's the sign, now you're talking 24, 48, 50.
That's more of a monument, sort of like what we have.
And that's, and that, these monument signs come up in this, and that's.
Well, let's go the opposite direction. Let's start with Councilmember Livingstone.
If you're talking about a temporary sign, I mean, I accept your legal expertise on 24 inches. 24 inches seems kind of wide to me. I would think
So this is
something-
for all signs. The definition is this is not specific only to
all for
temporary.
temporary. Okay. I find 24 then.
I think it could be a little less. I think we probably could be like 12 inches, like a foot depth of a, to allow a cabinet if it's lighted or something like that. I think 24 is a lot.
Councilmember Zabel.
I could go from 12 to 18. Well, the reason I'm thinking is because you have to have some room for bulbs, et cetera.
Right.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Councilmember Bain.
I remove my objections to this possible unconstitutional nonsense.
Mr. Roberts.
Mr. Horn, could you give me just one example of that type of sign? I think you started to give one, so what would be an example, just so I get a better visual?
If you pull up to a McDonald's and they've
Okay.
got a sign out with the arch, let's say at the base there, with the arches on one side and the arch on the other side, and in between it's a block.
Okay,
So when you're on either side of that,
it would say the same thing.
it's how far apart is each golden arch.
You're looking at it sideways, yeah.
Right.
Your dentist's office, all those sorts of monuments, how far apart is each side of it? And it's to avoid somebody taking up a great deal of space, just basically.
It's like you're looking at me now on the sign, but if I turn sideways, you see my gut? That's
Or
right.
is it-
That's right, the size of your gut. Yeah, definitely now.
I think because we're mostly residential, I think 12 would be funny. I don't see it as some 24.
Leslie?
Go for 12.
Just for argument's sake, how wide is our monument sign?
Larger than 24.
3 feet?
I'd say the base of the board's got to be 4 to 6 inches and then
Well, I would be fine with 24. So there's 2 24s, 3 12s, and an 18.
I'll go 24.
Right. And you had 18, so now it's split right down the middle.
So what would we have to do to that monument situation then? that would be out of compliance.
There's a difference first for government properties as they're regulated in this, and that's also consistent with the constitutional guidance. But I would say that ultimately, if there is a sign, you have a non-conforming structure. The structure would likely endure until such time as the structure, the sign, was destroyed, in which case it would have to come into compliance. Is how that would ordinarily be treated.
Let's go back around, let's knock this one out. Anyone changing your minds?
I'll change the 24 schedule.
So that's 4 to 2.
And again, this is the workshop phase. If at some point you, after today, you start realizing I didn't quite know we were looking at something like that, or you drive around and start seeing things, this is just to get the process started.
Right, and after we make these changes, we'll be presented with an updated copy and with hopefully more highlights and things to consider.
The next definition is artwork. Top of the very next page, if displayed as a two-dimensional representation on a flat surface, the same shall not exceed a quarter of the total surface area. However, if displayed, and then the next one is a half, there are those definitions.
Okay, Councilmember Baker, would you prefer that I just not call on you during this
You
conversation?
can call me, and for the record, I'm going to repeat, I renew my objections as possible unconstitutional nonsense. I mean, this is just bad law.
Okay, I will continue calling on you then. Councilmember Baker, I'd like to hear your opinion on this size.
I renew my objection to this unconstitutional, possible unconstitutional nonsense.
I'd say,
I'm sorry, I'm just thinking graphically, yeah, 1 quarter's fine. That's the graphics, and then obviously underneath or above or sideways is the lettering saying something hotel, our phone number, no vacancy.
Vice Mayor Shirley,
I'm fine with it as it's written.
Ms. Livingstone,
I'm in agreement.
agreement? Mr. Roberts,
I'm good.
Sarah. Now, I'm just curious, is this any surface that they decide to turn into a sign?
I believe it is, yes.
So if I
Because it's in
wanted-
like Nashville, you've seen that it's become like the walls of your building.
So if I wanted to paint 1 quarter of my garage door, that would be acceptable, right?
Potentially, and again, this is, it depends factor of every legal issue is going to come in here, but potentially.
So a campaign sign, for example, if I wanted to do 1 quarter of my garage door, it's okay according to this policy.
Something that is artwork, not.
Yeah, this is the
This is your
representation of a creative
stars
idea that is
and
expressed in an
stripes.
art
When you
form.
put Dave for mayor, it's the art, stars and stripes, I thought.
Great question, Mr. Mayor.
But there's some, our code also has some language about how your house can be painted, right? So, right, so that would take care of that problem.
The reason why I'm asking this question is I'm just trying to clarify, does a sign policy override or overrule the property design, paint, landscaping, et cetera? That's why I brought that up. I just wanted to, I was looking for some clarification.
That's a question I'll digest some more. I just, I've been trying to think about it in the vacuum of this moment. I'm not in the best position to give you an answer.
That's fine. I will agree, tentatively agree with you.
Initially, though, Mayor, I would say that like an election sign is not a creative idea, and that, as that, within the scope of that definition.
Understand. Page 20.
Yeah, I'm not sure about this either. I mean, is it, if I'm the sign or on the wall of the place, you're talking projection from me out into the street 12 inches?
Mr. Zabel,
I'm sorry.
can you hold on, because I want him to kind of define what it is we're talking about,
No.
and then we'll go around that.
So we're on page 21. On the, sorry, 20, it's 21 in the PDF, I'm looking at, my mistake. Page 20 at the bottom, the definition of a projecting sign is any sign affixed perpendicular at any angle to a building or wall in such a manner that its leading edge extends more than, and here it says 12 inches beyond the surface of such building or wall. Standard channel set letters on signs do not render a sign a projecting sign. So here, a projecting sign is any sign affixed, again, to the front of the building, or at an angle perpendicular like this to a building or wall in such a manner that its leading edge extends more. So if you've got coming out of here candy shop and it goes more than 12 inches beyond the surface of the building or wall that it's extending from, it can only be 12 inches long. It's coming off that wall.
So a good example would be somebody hanging a welcome sign.
Yeah, that extends more than 12 inches off, yes. And again, I want to reiterate, especially to echo Mr. Banker's present position, I want to be very clear. If there's a kind of sign you're like, honestly, I don't want that regulated, we don't have to regulate it. You folks are the policymakers. We have given you here is everything in the universe to consider, and you can take it, believe it, modify it as you wish.
Thank you very much. Ms. Notaro.
12 inches is fine.
Mr. Roberts.
I'm fine with how it's written.
Mr. Baker.
Because of the last issue that the vice mayor and the mayor brought up, I strenuously object to this possible unconstitutional.
Mr. Zabel.
12 inches is okay.
Vice Mayor Shirley.
12 inches is fine.
Ms. Livingstone.
I'm in agreement with how it's written.
I'll agree to that also.
And I want to be clear that this is the definition section. So that's defining what a projecting sign is, but under 86-4, which we'll get to in a few pages, there's a list, and while I did not specifically highlight anything, because again, all of this is up for discussion, as we look at these definitions, be mindful that some of these signs are prohibited. A projecting sign is a prohibited sign under this, as drafted. Portable signs, roof signs, all prohibited signs. So remember, this isn't a restriction as much as it is a definition.
Right, and this is stating anything that projects more than 12 inches out is considered a projecting sign.
Yeah.
All right. Next page is 22, the bottom of the vehicle sign.
And a vehicle sign is a sign which covers more than 10 square feet of the vehicle, identifying a business, product, or service, and which is attached to, mounted, pasted, painted, or drawn on a motorized or drawn vehicle and is parked and visible from the public right-of-way unless the vehicle is used for transporting people or materials in the normal day-to-day operation of the business. I think that definition speaks for itself. Again, whether or not you wish to regulate that in a certain way is addressed later on.
Councilmember Livingstone.
As far as the description, I'm fine. We're going to address them later on.
Vice Mayor Shirley.
Fine with me.
Councilmember Zabel.
Fine with me.
Councilmember Baker.
I again object to this possible unconstitutional orders.
For the sake of expediency, if you don't mind, I'm just going to buy that to you.
Just leave it at-
Standing objection.
No, it did change.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. All right, Mr. Roberts.
Yeah, so if it is less than 10 square feet, Mr. Moore, what is it defined as? Not a vehicle sign? I'm just curious. You said if it's more, if it's more than 10 square feet.
Then it would not constitute a vehicle sign.
Okay, it's not a vehicle sign, it's just,
So, yeah, if you just have a square foot that says Jimmy John's.
okay. So later on, when they reference a vehicle sign, we'll know that it's something that's more than 10 square feet. Okay. I'm good.
And it sounds to me, whenever you count the number of square feet, a small magnetic sign on each one of your doors would be acceptable, or would not, we couldn't qualify it as a vehicle sign. Ms. Matera?
10 square feet works.
I'll agree with that one also.
But just to point out something here, Mr. Chair, so it's, you have 2 signs, 2 by 3, that's 12 square feet, so, and the sign. I know you got the living part.
You're on my refrigerator.
The next thing, though not highlighted, Mr. Mayor, in the event any member went through this meticulously and had concerns, I do want to make sure the list of prohibited signs on pages 26 through 28 are reviewed to make sure there's, and vehicle signs are one of those. This is vehicle signs visible from the street right of way within 100 feet of the vehicle and the vehicle is parked for more than 2 consecutive hours in a 24-hour period. That's how that reads. Again, just not, any language in here is not a, this is exactly what you should have, but is intended to make you, give you the opportunity to evaluate. That said, I wasn't sure if there was any input on the prohibited signs as you read that list. And sometimes it may require you to go back to the definition section and know precisely what a pennant sign or a wind sign is as you go through that list. But I just wanted to make sure that you did take a moment to look at that list of prohibited signs and see if anything gave you a concern based on the particular dynamics of your community or your policy positions.
Okay, so maybe what we should do, has everyone gone through this list? Did anyone see, other than Councilmember Baker, did anyone see something that jumped out at them that should not have been there?
I still understand the snipe sign.
Yeah, the definition is,
Where did you see that?
it's in the definition area.
So snipe signs are colloquially those signs that you just see pop up all around. Come to my karate dojo, and things that get thrown in your right of way and the like. Those are typically how colloquially that is. The definition reads, a sign made of any material when such sign is tacked, nailed, posted, pasted, glued, or otherwise attached to or placed on public property, such as but not limited to a public utility pole, street sign, utility box, fire hydrant, right of way, public street furniture, or other public property. And then it has, except for an A-frame or T-frame sign that is temporarily placed on public property under such limitations and constraints as are in
I just wanted to verify that because in the case, these are rare, but with a marathon, they'll frequently put the route signs up on.
And those are typically permitted pursuant to their special event permit and all the other wayfaring requirements they go through to be able to have that event in the first place. That is a permitted event, not a call me for guitar lessons. So absent any specific feedback, and again, this is just our first go through of this, I'll just continue to the next highlighting unless there was a different, unless the council wishes to proceed differently. Next highlighting.
I think the vehicle sign would have an issue. I mean, there's
I'm sorry?
jobs, the vehicle sign, there's plenty of job sites, there's trailers are parked there with signage on the vehicle.
Well, in your community, being smaller, tighter, what's visible from the right-of-way is bigger than what you might see in a community where there's more separation. So if you, that's definite, prohibited, in the prohibited sign list, it's FF on page 28 of the document, 29 if you're following along digitally. So if that's a prohibited sign category definition you wish to revisit, by all means, or restriction I should say, by all means, please let me know.
Where code enforcement out, right?
See, that's what I thought it allowed it under the previous reading that we had. Unless said vehicle is used for transporting people or materials in the normal day-to-day operation of the business. So if I got an electrician, that's going to be a handyman that's working there 8 hours. He's in the day-to-day operation of his business, so that type of sign, even though it's more than 10 foot on the side of his van, that's okay, because it's going to be.
I'm not so sure that's how that's intended to operate, because by definition, every vehicle is intended to transport people. I'm not so sure that's how that definition would be applied. We'll revisit that.
The way I see this, I'm going, okay, this is like the condo ordinance, you can't drive your work truck home and park it in your
Right.
driveway. It's kind of what I'm seeing this as. And I'm not saying that that's bad, but I am saying that there are several construction trailers I see around town that have the contractor's name on them that are parked on the site during the term of the construction period, so.
Or on the side of a dumpster.
Actually, no, we're revisiting it, seeing vehicles used for transporting people or materials in the normal day-to-day operation of the business. So yes, you're.
So a dumpster, et cetera, they're all okay.
I would read that way, but again, I will flag that as something that I give particular attention to, both in the definition and its application in FF.
Is there anything else that jumped out? Page 30.
The highlighting in blue is just to make sure that I'm looking at cross-references, making sure they're still good, and that's what we're going to finalize it. So I'm only going to stick to the yellow. The next yellow I see is signs for illegal non-conforming use. On page 30 at the very bottom, a non-conforming sign for non-conforming use that ceases to be used for a period of 60 consecutive days, and that's consistent with the abandonment definition that we had done earlier, is replaced by conforming use, shall be considered a prohibited sign and shall be removed. You do have very limited uses in your community, but if, for example, you had, and I saw this in another community, for example, you have an old used car lot where you couldn't put a used car lot today, and they stopped selling used cars for 90 days. And one is that abandoned business, but it's a non-conforming sign, for a non-conforming use. And they also had a giant, let's say they had a mounted Chrysler LeBaron or something in the sky there, an old 57 Chevy on a pole. Okay, you've been in it's non-conforming use and a non-conforming sign, both got to go. That's that 60 days. I think given the guidance earlier on abandonment, that's consistent. I don't think we need to revisit that unless a member has a concern about it beyond the standing objection.
Is everyone fine with 60 days? Or do we have any differing?
The same with the signs discontinued, so I'll continue to scroll through for yellow highlighting in the document. As lengthy as the document is, we're nearing the end of things that were specifically flagged. Page 38, on 8619, temporary sign installation removal, unless otherwise provided for in this chapter. And I'll tell you that this is where a lot of communities have spent a lot of time in their ordinances.
Hold on a second.
Yes, sir.
We were on 30 and then you went to 38, 31.
Oh, I'm sorry, the 31 was another 60 days on an abandoned sign. I didn't call it out, but it was another discontinued sign. And it was consistent, I again would stand by that being consistent.
Everybody okay with the conformity there?
Okay.
The next thing is temporary sign removal, section 8619. Unless otherwise provided for in this chapter, temporary signs shall not be erected for more than 100 days prior to the event being advertised on the temporary sign begins, and they shall be removed promptly at the event's conclusion. Temporary signs not advertising an event to occur on a specific date, but which are related to the occurrence of an expected future event or transaction, including but not limited to real estate for sale signs, shall not be subject to the 100-day provision of the subsection, but such signs shall also be removed promptly upon the earliest of the occurrence of the event or transaction. So if you're saying for sale, you don't know when the sale is going to happen. So you might be out for more than 100 days, but when the sale happens, it comes up. And it's that real estate regulation is offered as an example, not a regulation directed based on content. And so in this particular case, the 100 days, this would apply to an election. You can't put, if you agree as written, you can't put a vote for Randy sign out more than 100 days before election day. Notwithstanding early voting, notwithstanding the ways that those constructs have changed. And so that same is true on the Komen for the Cure run on November 10th or something. So understand it makes it frustrating for some policymakers because you're treating two inherently dissimilar things in a similar way, but that is the construct that we're operating within.
Question, you're talking about 100 days applying to a political sign, but then subsection B on 39 talks about 60 days for a political sign. Specifically.
Let's see that, sorry. Forgive me, it has been a moment since I looked at the document in full and remembered all of its content. Yes, those are there.
Specific requirements for political signs as opposed to other temporary signs.
So political signs are 60 days.
I'm going to tell you that drafting note, and this was drafted in cooperation with one of my colleagues, I want to make sure that we revisit that, just to make sure that we're still, based on some more recent cases, still good with that. But yes, and at this point, I would ask for your input as it's written. So the 100 days for 100 days for general rule concerning temporary signs. If you wish, and again, that would be come in, real estate, whatever, no earlier than 100 days before the special event. Temporary.
I'm curious why 100 and why not 90? Where'd that number come from?
It's not based on a very specific policy. It's based on a number that's been seen in other codes. Whether if you wish to make it 90, 45, that's again, we're looking to you. That's why it's there as a placeholder, not there as the gold standard.
This would primarily be for events forthcoming. So what are we doing right now, Kyle, with, let's see, we had the chili cook-off, we had beach cleanup, we've had several events here. How far in advance are you putting signs out?
The maximum was 2 weeks.
30 days out of that. Awesome.
Almost 700. I think 30 should be plenty. I can't think of a reason for it to be more than that.
I go for 30, I think 100 is over.
30? So that headed on page 38 would be 30.
30 understood.
Then now we're to page 39. This is the 60 days for political signs. I know that whenever they were out for 105, people were angry.
It's not bad. It was awful.
We didn't start it.
Thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts are, and you're right, a lot of feedback from the citizens. And clearly, 60 days, most of our elections are in March timeframe. I think a key date that's going to be after is the Christmas holidays. And people were sad about that. There were some of the signs out there during, before Christmas. So this way, by making it 60 days, it would be sometime in January, which would be great.
I think that's a good idea. Others?
Question. As far as removing them, candidates for federal, state, county, municipal, or district office, you have to get them out within 30 days, or candidates for city office within 72 hours. What's the difference?
Well, the candidate is here locally, and walk beyond next door and pull the sign versus to get a candidate for a state office. They gotta get their campaign workers, they gotta organize that, and that was my thought behind that. That's what it takes.
That's only if they win. If they lose, you could.
But aren't they typically placed by the resident, as all the, potential placements are in a residential?
Yes, it's going to be in somebody's front yard, which he had to approve it, so they can take it out.
Definitely, Vice Mayor Shirley's on to something. I think that the elections, the local elections that we have, we're working and we're going out. How you doing? Can I put a sign in your yard, or would you like one? And then who does it? We do it. And then 3 days, within 3 days, we go right out. Usually the next day, we pick them right back up. The other signs are actually being placed by the homeowner. They're going and getting those signs. So it's a different situation, and they may not necessarily be there. Because we're going to pick them up ourselves, so. Thoughts?
Shorten it, so maybe 15
Yeah.
days or something?
Yeah.
30 seems like a lot, but
It
yeah.
does.
14 days,
14.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Everyone agree with that?
14.
Yes.
Understood. That was, is that shortening the 30 to the 14, or?
Yes.
Just making sure, because there's
30 to 14.
3 numbers there, I want to make sure we're all talking about the same.
60 remains and 72 hours at the point. All right, we are on to page 40. We're getting more and more of these yellow highlights.
Yeah, this is where a lot more of the work is done in this draft, and the temporary signage restrictions and what meets what definition. So the next page is page 41. Signs allowed in all districts, no permit required. Temporary signs shall be allowed on each parcel as follows. Enumerated the districts, the number of signs, and their general dimensions, which are the most common ways of regulating signs post-Reed Gilbert.
Well, let's start back on page 40. And
Sorry, did I skip one over? Sorry, 40. I said 40 again, I was looking at the keyboard. Yes, on page 40, temporary signs as it relates.
okay. So let's start with number 1 there, the RL district. They display up to 4 temporary signs, shall not exceed 4 square feet in any sign area and 4 feet in height.
Are they talking about single-sided signs, so you can put 4 single-sided signs or 4 double-sided signs? Talking about sign area.
I think that the signs are one and the same. I think it's a single or double counts as the same. Is that correct, Mr. Moore?
I'm sorry, I was distracted. Could you say that again?
Are we picking up sounds from someone out on Zoom?
It sounded that way.
Well, that's me,
Oh,
Oh.
you were in the direction of the laptop. Sorry, sir.
Maybe we'll go back to the question about, are you talking about single-sided or double-sided signs? In terms of you doing the calculation.
Right. This portion of the code makes no distinction between a single-sided and a double-sided sign.
That's the way I read it also, so that works. But how about the size? Everybody okay with that? All right.
Okay. We do.
Then number 2, in the RM district, each parcel may display 1 temporary sign which shall not exceed 24 square feet in sign area and 6 feet in height. Ultimately, each parcel in the RM district may display up to 8 temporary signs which cumulatively shall not exceed 24 square feet in sign area and 4 feet in height. So, and what you're saying is if a business wants to stack their signs a certain way, then that's okay?
If they want to meet those dimensions and requirements, this would be permitted. Again, none of these numbers are offered as some gold standard. If you wish to change any of them, you're free to.
I got a brief question, just regarding the RLRM. I'm not sure about the abbreviation that you used or the terminology. So the RL is residential versus RM is.
It's residential level, so it's all the single family homes. And
Okay.
residential medium, which is going to be like condominiums.
My concern is with temporary signs in the RM district, condo area. We've got 10 units in our building. If everyone wanted to put up a different political sign in front, maybe there aren't that many people running, but,
What does your HOA say?
pardon?
What does your HOA say? You
I
have,
don't know what it says.
some of them say yes. No, I'm just saying, some
Yeah, no.
HOAs.
Yeah, I don't know.
And again, it's a point well raised. If you have a condominium association or homeowners association with its own restrictions, we don't enforce that, but they could and would and say, hey, in addition to the city saying you guys have 8, according to us, no resident is allowed to put anything in the common grass in the, in our frontage, and so it might be 0, even though we say we give them 8, they might say it's 0. And we don't have control over how they administer their rules.
Saw a few signs that just disappeared, and it was because their HOA removed,
Yeah.
just completely removed this thing where it's policy.
Yeah.
Anyone want to challenge that one, or are you okay with these numbers on 1 and 2? Council?
Okay.
All right. Number 3, temporary signs displayed outdoors shall be constructed of metal, plastic, wood, pressed wood, but not of cardboard or paper, and shall be fastened to temporary support not exceeding 4 inches by 4 inches. I was trying to figure out exactly what kind of support that would be.
So you mean the age brackets?
4 inches.
Like a real estate sign post. It's a 4x4.
Okay, that
Oh.
makes more sense. So there's no height.
Or construction company to put up.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Cardboard or paper? I mean, I'm trying to think of what the campaign signs that we've all used, whatever it's constructed, those are plastic.
Yeah,
Okay.
vinyl.
Can't be paper on the floor of some.
I think I'm guessing the purpose of that is because as soon as it rains,
Yeah.
it becomes paper mache permanently on the lawn. Everyone okay with that one?
Yeah.
Now we're down to flags.
Okay, I got to chime in on this one. 2 flags not greater than 50, and I mean, I'll tell you personally, I got a 30-foot flagpole and I fly a 5x8, which is 40 square foot. And that'd be in violation of this, and that flagpole's been up for at least 7 years. Thank you. I got to replace the rope on it. Yeah.
And I know it sounds redundant, but I have to make it very clear for the record, none of this is established as some legal
Yeah.
standard.
Yeah.
You guys do what makes sense for your community, and if you want any of those numbers changed, feel free to change them.
30. Oh, the flag is a 5x8. Right now, I got the 2x3, but 5x8.
That's standard flag size.
Yeah, it is.
Um,
It only lasts about 3 months per replacement.
So you do a United States flag, a Florida flag, and now you're at 80 square feet.
Oh, yeah, you're way over.
I think there's provisions in the law that will change from the United States flag.
That's what it was then.
I'm sorry?
I think there were provisions in the Supreme Court ruling that challenge on the United States flag, and I'll have in front of me, exempting flying the United States flag.
If you have any of that authority, I'm always happy to consider it.
Anyway, I'd just like to change it, say 2 flags not greater than 80.
It'd be 2 flags not greater than 40 square feet. Is that right?
And, no, 80. Because you
Yeah,
got
that
2
would be
5x8s.
2. See, this says 2 flags not greater than 15. I guess
Yeah.
I was thinking about each flag.
Yeah, they don't have an each on this one. They got the each in the RM one.
Not totally
Or else it-
greater than 80 square feet.
Okay, sorry.
Would that make more sense?
Yeah, and then 30 for the, go measure number, it's 30.
Your flagpole is 30 feet.
Because I remember, it's not much on the floor, it's a lot.
Which coincides with that building, right?
What about a resident that has a 40-foot flag?
It's like 35 here.
Or in the 10 at 40 foot,
Huh?
or in the 10 at 40 foot.
It has a 10-foot flag. This is what we call government express.
a 25-foot flagpole in RL district and a 35-foot flagpole in the RM district.
Larger building, bigger flag. That's probably where they're going with that.
That's what I just.
Yeah, the reasoning was the differences in uses between the two, permissible uses and the two, permissible and historical uses in the two, but if you wish to harmonize them, you're free to.
So on page 41 to 25, does everyone agree with 30? Are we going to ask Mr. Zabel to do something about it? 30 okay?
I'm fine with 30 or 35. Our building restriction is we can't go any higher than 35 feet on our structures. So,
Just harmonizing at 35.
yeah.
35 for both, then it simplifies things. All right.
And what did we change the square footage?
It was a total of 80, but I think what we want to say is one flag. You can have two flags, but neither flag can be larger than 40.
Each 40. Understood.
Now, see,
So Randy, just curious to me, under B where it says flags, and then it talks about not greater than 15, which would change it to 40 for each square feet, and then it says in sign area. So is that just interchangeable, a flag and a sign? Would it be more appropriate to say
Flag
40
is,
square feet in flag?
flag is a sign in
Okay.
in that context.
Okay, got it.
So on section 2, page 41, we're talking about the RM district. They're allowed to have two flagpoles, 35 feet, but then they're limited to one on one flagpole and two on the other. Am I reading that correctly?
Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I'm reading in the same place.
3 flags not greater than 24 square feet and sign area may be displayed. 2 flagpoles are allowed. I think that if you're going to do this, they're probably going to have one maybe, they could have them at each end of the property, they could have them side by side, but ultimately, why not allow them to have 4 and give them the same rules that we do? If you have a flagpole, you can put 2 flags on it. If you have 2 flagpoles, then you can have a total of 4 flags.
Makes sense to me, Mayor. Whatever you guys want.
Does that sound all right?
The same square footage, right, would apply.
Yeah, the same
It's
40.
consistent, the 40.
40 per
Also,
flag.
square footage.
Yeah, the square footage would be 40 per flag, a total of 4 flags, but no more than 2 flags per pole. And then, do we have anything in here that addresses these, I forget, like I said, you may know what the actual name of it is, but it's the T configuration where.
That is the traditional yacht club, there's a cross beam. So you got the main mast and the cross where you put those signal flags.
And then they string signal flags all the way top to bottom.
And you gotta watch what they read because sometimes we like putting different words on it.
So that's not been addressed.
Halyards, by the way, I'm sorry.
Thoughts?
Yeah, finally, because we have somebody in the locale that does have a, I think it's like a 8-footer and has the halyards that they drop and little signal flags on.
Or do we just label that as a single flag and ignore the pennants?
Because the pens are really small. In fact, occasionally I'll fly pens myself.
Just bringing it up. All right. Mr. Moore, would you like to review item C with us on page 41?
Parking space signs, hotel, motel, apartment, on-site parking space number or identification signs not exceeding 2 square feet, excuse me, of sign face per sign shall be allowed on each parcel within the RM district. 1 such sign shall be allowed for each parking space. The maximum height for a freestanding or attached wall sign is 6 feet. To to me, pretty direct what it's saying there, but again, if you wish to change that.
I think that's pretty consistent with DOT as well.
Everyone good with that one? Good. All right, D,
Similarly, this relates to street address signs and those put on residential mailboxes with a limit of one attached wall street address sign, and the street address sign shall not exceed 2 square feet in sign area.
Does that include, some people put their house number on the curb or the drainage? Or they'll do a painted stencil possibly?
Excuse me.
It says a Wall Street address.
I don't think as written that it would extend to a curb, as it says, to the wall and the mailbox as written. If you wish for it to be explicitly accepted or included, please let me know.
I'd like to accept it.
everyone okay with that? Let's see here, now we're at F, no, yes, we're at F. Warning signs and safety signs. Not exceeding 4 square feet in sign area shall be in all districts. Maximum height of these signs shall be 4 feet unless otherwise required by law. Explain to me, are we talking about a good example, hazardous beach day, something like that? What type of warning signs are we talking about?
Look at page
Just go back to
23,
the
it's
definition
fine.
section.
What did you say, Russell?
On page 23, warning signs is defined as warning of a dangerous condition or situation that might not be readily apparent.
Like we're done.
Or tied like a hole in the lot, like, I mean, any,
High voltage gas lines or houses.
Fallen power line.
We just threw that out for
the way it reads in the definition section is a sign which provides warning of a dangerous condition or situation that might not be readily apparent or that poses a threat of serious injury, e.g., for example, a gas line, high voltage, condemned building, etc., or that provides warning of a violation of law. Example, no trespassing, no hunting allowed, etc.
Beware of dog.
Potentially, that's a warning.
4 square feet, but that could be anywhere, so, how's everyone feel about this one? 4 feet, all right?
Fine.
Should it be 2?
What's that?
Should it be 2 square feet? I'm trying to think of like a,
That's a 1 by
2 by 2.
2 is 4, so.
yeah, I'm trying to think of, you see the no trespassing.
Oh, the
sign.
traditional, they're
Yeah,
about 12 by 8.
They're small. And that's usually to keep somebody from entering your property. But if you're driving down the street and there's something, that's just trying to think of all possibilities of where a warning sign and
I'm
safety
just
sign.
thinking, for instance, like there's a sign nailed to a tree next to a bridge that says no trespassing or no fishing or something.
I know
along
exactly
those
the property
lines.
you're talking about.
And, what's to prevent that sign from getting
I got you.
2 by 2, you
Yeah.
know?
Hold on 1 second. I'd like to speak to the citizens that are out in the audience. Tonight is a work session. This is not typical where we take citizen comments about any subject that happens to be on your mind at the time. I see that I have quite a few. Okay, whenever we get to items that are on the agenda, I will call upon you for these particular ones. I see one about selling property. I can't help with that one tonight. However, you're welcome to hang around until the end of the meeting and speak to any of us, and then we'll try to respond to you at that time. And the purpose of that is to keep this meeting going. And we will be wrapping up this meeting at 9 p.m. And so we'll all be available if you'd like to speak
till after the meeting for questions?
I'm sorry?
Wait till after the meeting for questions?
Well, we've got several things that are on the agenda that I will be more than happy to hear your opinion, but I can't promise you that we'll get to it, because this is a
I understand, and I texted beforehand to see if we could speak, that's the only reason why I came. And some others did. But if that's the case, we can leave as long as there's nothing passed tonight, we can address that.
We're not passing anything.
As a matter of the rules of procedure, nothing, no official
acts.
action.
We can address it at that point, I have no problem.
All this is a work session, and feel free to contact any of us, and whenever we do our regular council meeting on the first Monday of every month, the very first thing that we do is we take citizen comments, and if there happens to be a concern about a certain agenda item, we'll call on you at that time.
Perfect, I can get dinner earlier than I thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, where were we?
We had waterfront identification signs, Mr. Mayor, unless you folks are still concerned about the 4 feet on warning signs.
Okay. Any issues with that one? Vice Mayor Shirley?
I mean, I don't know how, I mean, could it be used? I think that we should consider reducing the size of that, but a 4-foot sign is a pretty big sign for to be nailed to a tree.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. How does everyone else feel?
That's, at least the way I read this one, this is going to be on the waterfront, visible from the water.
I'm still talking about.
She was still on warning signs.
Yeah, the warning signs, yeah, I'm with you, I understand that one.
Kind of
It
like
shouldn't
a-
be a 2x2 at all.
Yeah.
It should be a regular,
Or one-
in fact,
one-
what's that size? That's one of those,
Yeah, I'm thinking like a, what is it, 1.5 by 1 would be the most, or is it 3 square feet, something like that, or is it 2? I don't know, but I think it needs to be smaller than a 4 square foot sign.
Does everyone else agree with Vice Mayor Shirley
So you just want to make it 2 square feet,
on item F?
right?
Yes.
Warning signs.
1.5 by 1 would be obviously 1.5 square feet, which would be less than 2. You want to make it 2 square feet.
Yeah.
How about the 12-year-old that loses a bill or a cat? Hold that 12-year-old to the size of the sign. Goes to the telephone.
If it stays, it might get taken down because it's a, what do we call that?
Snipe, that would constitute a snipe sign.
And
The
maximum
difference
height is
between what a
still
code-
4 feet, right? Maximum height.
Yes.
Then back to the waterfront identification signs, you have a problem with leaving that at 4 square feet. Everyone okay with that one? Because you need to be able to read those.
Yeah.
like, no way, yeah, I agree.
All right, temporary window signs. For any hotel or motel, one or more temporary window signs may be displayed on the inside of the window. Temporary window signs shall not cover more than 50% of the area of the window, except that if the hotel or motel displays such signs is also displaying the one permanent sign, window sign authorized by this chapter. Then the total area of the window covered by a combination of these shall not exceed 30% of the area of the window. You know, this is for a hotel, motel. I don't care.
Where would they put it in there, like no vacancy, just a little paper sign inside the window or something?
Oh, we don't have a hotel or motel on the beach.
That's right. Even though it looks like one.
Looks like
And
one,
again, if
walks
there's
like
any-
one, it sounds like one.
And again, if there's any category of this that you just don't think is necessary to regulate, then just say, you can strike that from any provision of this. Or if you think this too much, you could just,
I think that you could leave it in or take it out, and it's not going to make any difference one way or the other.
well, my recommendation to you is if you don't think it makes any difference in your community, then you likely don't need it. And we can take it out if you
That
don't
would
say
save us some money on our community code. So strike letter I. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Should we wait until we get through our review, planning and zoning, review before we officially say strike it, put a question mark next to it.
Okay.
I can just flag it as commission intends to strike.
Tentatively strict. Page 42. Poles, banners. Where banners for displays on light poles shall not exceed 12 square feet in area or 20 feet in height.
Is this the holiday sign, or we're exempt from that if we, with our holiday sign? I just wasn't sure. Because we, in fact, we're talking about that later, so.
I think that this is, probably applies to us also. But that's a pretty darn big sign or banner. 12 square feet, that's not terrible.
2 by 6.
2 by 6, or 20 feet in height.
How big are the ones that are on the light posts?
I bet that those are,
They're like 2 by 3.5.
yeah, something like that.
They're like 2 by 4, 2 by 3.5.
Depends on whether you're a palm tree or a starfish.
But I would,
About a mermaid.
Well, there was definitely some mermaids down there.
yeah.
I'm fine with that size. Thoughts? And this is something to consider because we're looking at doing other things in the future than what we're doing right now.
I have a thought, actually. I know I saw Kyle and his crew putting up a sign on the building recently. Was that for the chili cook-off? What's it called?
With the other ones.
Yeah, the other ones. So my thought was, because I see cables going across the street, and I think we discussed this previously one time, that if we put a permanent cable, just a permanent cable across at the same height, it would have to be higher than whatever lower cable is already there, just so we're not causing any issues. And then whatever type of signs, banners that we want to put in or advertise it or something, we could just put that on there, stream it across, and it's up in less than 2 minutes.
I like the idea, but it's not code. That's not a code discussion.
Well,
Are you talking going across the causeway?
no, I'm just talking like, crossing the street right here. So when you're coming across the bridge and you're going home or the other direction, there it is.
You're going to tie the cable across the street.
Correct.
What height?
It would, like I said, it would have to be higher than whatever the lowest current
You
cable.
have FDOT that has requirements because you bring in equipment or whatever.
Like, that's why I said it would have to be higher. So in other words, because there are cables that go right across that street.
Similar to what they do in the city of Valier.
Another time, okay, got it. So that's why I was bringing it up though about the size of the banner. But we can talk about that later. Okay.
This is strictly for light poles, is what this is discussing.
Okay.
Whether they're attached to light poles.
Okay, so just one whole banner.
12 and 20. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
And Mr. Moore, everywhere I see blue, is that where you need to verify that?
Just flagging the cross references so that we make sure. Yes, sir.
Okay, we are at B2, which is temporary signs at construction sites. The sign shall not exceed 32 square feet. I'm assuming this is the coming soon, great, this big, beautiful McMansion. Okay.
4 by 8.
It used to be 24 feet, and I think we probably should
So
take a
that's
look at
24.
that.
4 squares?
Yeah, 24 square feet,
Also 4 by 6.
which is still big.
Yeah, it is.
Everybody okay with 24?
Sure.
You see that, Mr. Moore?
24 from 32, yes, sir.
All right. All signs shall be set back a minimum of 10 feet from all property lines.
That would put the sign slab in the middle of the site.
Yes.
Probably, I would say, 2 feet from property line, because you've got your easement and then your property line, so.
That's true.
So you're agreeing with the 10 feet?
No, I'm saying
smaller.
like 2 or 3 feet.
2 or
from the
3 feet.
property.
Which
Yeah,
allows you,
But you can't put it in the setback, so, yeah, I think you're right.
Because you've got your setback, and then you've got your, you've got, and then you've got the easement out and the road frontage. So if you're a couple of feet in from that, from the easement, which is what, is it 3 feet?
Well, yeah, the right of way, so that's
Right.
typically 10 to 15 feet off that road edge, depending where you're at. And then it starts the property line, and then from the property line to the front.
10 or 15 feet from the center of road, or from the edge of road?
From about 10 to 15 from the edge of the road.
Why would you even have a number then? Just say it's illegal to place one of these signs in the
Right.
right of way.
Yeah. It must be inside the property line.
Inside the property line, yeah. Anything.
Okay. 8623A, permanent wall, window, or monument sign is allowed for each such building or complex not to exceed 24 square feet in size. However, such a sign, when a monument sign, shall not exceed 6 feet in height. This is on the RM district. This would be their permanent sign stating who they are.
Yeah, this is the Dolphin condos, or I'm just making up a name, I don't know if that's what you're. Saying like the monument side that announces, like, this is Vista Del Mar.
Yeah.
It's the-
Corona Del Rey.
Yeah, this is
Del Boca.
That's how that would be, that's that monument sign that you think of, with the pedestal and all that.
It's no bigger than what we're doing with the temporary signs for construction companies. Everybody okay with
Yeah, I
that?
think it's fine.
All right.
Then we're just saying, yeah, monument signs, they're only allowed monument signs, is that what we're?
It's not the only, because they're allowed directional in the next provision.
Oh.
Um, And there's a difference here between a window or a monument.
Or we don't do pole signs and such.
There's wall signs. I mean, there are different ones. I wouldn't say it's the only one, but it's the main one, the largest ones, to be sure.
I need to pull my definitions out and put it over here.
I can scroll to it, Mayor, if there's a definition you want read for the benefit of the
Well,
group.
it's finished.
Directional signs, that's telling.
Enter, exit.
Okay,
Or no.
all right. 4 square feet for those.
Yeah, that's fine.
Most of those are inside the property anyways.
Yeah.
All right, C,
Traffic.
one or more attached wall signs shall be allowed on the first level, first floor level, combined areas of signs shall not exceed 150 square feet. That covers any kind of sign or,
Again, if they want to put the name of the complex on the building, that's where that would go. That's most directly what that's addressing, but yes.
And these are non-lit signs.
everybody is okay with C? 150.
Yes.
D, a canopy or awning sign may be permitted, let's see here, instead of a wall sign, canopy or awning and signage, square footage combined shall not exceed the total permissible square footage for a wall sign. The height of the canopy or awning shall not exceed 16 feet first floor or 25 feet second floor. Everybody okay with those heights?
Yes.
Yes.
Wayfinding directional signs on motel, hotel, condominium, or apartment property, providing such signs do not exceed 4 square feet, which matches what we already just discussed. The directional sign may be displayed as an attached sign, window sign, or as a monument sign. If displayed as a monument sign, the monument sign shall not exceed 4 feet in height. We good with that?
Yes.
And it's their property. Page 43, temporary banner signs not exceeding 35 square feet in area and 8 feet in height may be displayed by a hotel, motel, condominium, or apartment building in conjunction with a grand opening for a maximum of 60 days from the date the building first opens. I guess an example of that would be a brand new condo, they knock one down and put a new one up in their open house.
of it is the recitations and otherwise doesn't have highlighting. I just, again, wish to say that, now that we've gone through this as a body in a more detailed fashion, noting, of course, the standing objections. If any of you have additional feedback you wish to give in the interim as this progresses through the process, I'm always available to you. Member Baker, if you have case law that you'd like me to review and consider, that may inform a better work product, I'm happy to look at that as well. With that, unless there's any other action, I'll incorporate these revisions, work with staff, and would you folks like to see this, I'm not trying to meet you to that, nor do I think I need it, but do you want to see this again before this goes to planning and zoning, or do you want us to clean this up, take it to P&Z, and then come back to you? I just want to make sure we have shared expectations on the process.
I would like to see it cleaned up and everything, or the changes put in, but I would like the highlights to remain so they can see specifically. Because even though it's a lot of material, it's relatively easy to go through it this way. Just get it out in the open. Any other comments from the council on this particular topic? Ms. Livingston?
I have a question. What are the next steps in this before it goes to planning and zoning and then?
Great question. So procedurally, how this would normally work, if you folks are subject to any other input you might have, we'd clean this up. It's already basically in ordinance format, so we're not talking about an idea that needs to be drafted. Take the ordinance to them and say, hey, the commission is looking to change this. They would have a meeting much like the one you just had, make their recommendations to you. You would adopt them, reject them. Ultimately, you're the governing body. And you'd have a first reading of an ordinance. If you wish, what we likely do, given the nature of this particular ordinance, is maybe have one more workshop. You don't have to. Again, if you folks don't feel that necessary, what would happen is you'd have a first reading. So you'd have a council meeting. I would read it by title only. And again, you go through and say, hey, we've had 2 workshops on this. Planning and zoning has made the additional changes. Do you wish to change this any further? Do you wish to scrap it? Because an ordinance can fail just because it's presented doesn't mean you have to pass it. And then we would have, and assuming it passes, we would have to have a second meeting. That meeting would be advertised, the ordinance title would be advertised in the paper. Again, we would take public comment at the first meeting and the second. And then ultimately a second vote, and if it passes again, then it's made part of your code.
Would it not be, or would it be unreasonable to ask if Kyle and his team, while all this is going on in the background, for the RM properties, just to kind of do a visual on, say, their flagpole heights or their signage, just to make sure, because if we're off by, say, 1 foot or what have you, you hate for them to go to the expense of, and just report back and say, everything's currently within what we're asking, or there's this one, it's 6 feet larger, but this other one has one that's 1 foot, or...
I think it's perfectly appropriate for, again, this was drafted, initial draft, the one you're looking at was drafted by the lawyers saying, here's what we got to do long. For absolutely, staff could make the effort of going through and making sure, hey, based on the numbers we're talking about, does this present an issue in our community? And that could be part of any staff reporting to you as we go through that process to say, hey, I know we all talked about 35, but actually half the ones in this community are 36 or whatever that is. But the only couching I would do of that is to say, that as we do each ordinance, it's not customary to have renderings and everything every single time, so as not to create that kind of expectation. But given the nature of this and its citywide application, certainly, and also you as council members, you folks are part of that process. While staff can do, you say staff, you guys have a pretty lean team. While staff can do that, it's also helpful for you folks if you say, hey, we went in through this in another community and they're like, hey, but what about the fish restaurant that's been here since 45? They've got this giant thing out there. Like, okay, we need to either address that or decide as a community that we don't want it anymore, whatever the thing is, and reflect that in our ordinance. So as you look around in light of having gone through this now, you are part of that process. And if you wish to inform staff, I have some concerns, what we were talking about based on properties X, Y, and Z, then please let us know.
So I have a recommendation. Whenever there's planning and zoning, there's a good possibility that they're going to disagree on some of the recommendations that we're making. So what I would like to see is after planning and zoning reviews it, whatever the changes are, I'd like for them to be just redlined so that we
you can quickly see where the
we can
deviations
see
were.
what their recommendations were. I think one more work session to review their recommended changes, and we could probably zip through it in 5, 10 minutes, and then put it in front of the council at the vote on it next meeting. Not this coming meeting.
But the next meeting in which it is presented.
And do we, what is the next meeting date for planning and zoning?
The first, Wednesday, the first of February.
Okay. Will you be able to have this prepared for them by then?
We could, but candidly, I don't think they would have the sufficient time to digest it, and they would be in a position where they'd say, thanks, Kyle, cool, can we meet on this again? My suggestion to you is that before Wednesday's meeting, we get it to them. We can get it to them as soon as next week in terms of these edits. And I'm only saying next week because I know what my current caseload is this week. But we could have it to them as soon as Monday next week and say, hey, start digesting this now at the P&Z meeting. Tell them we have another one. I'm just concerned about their ability to
We've
digest.
waited a long time, and I think if we have to wait another month or two, it's perfectly acceptable.
Can we cost this out for Community Code, how much it costs to publish it?
I have not, sir. That's
Patty, do you know how much?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
How much would this cost to put it in Community Code?
Oh, this, just by title, into the code?
he's saying to publish on Municode.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
If we were to publish on Municode, what would Municode charge us to add this to our Codify
Yeah.
online database?
It's 45 pages here.
Yeah, well, they're only going to do the changes. They don't do 45 pages. But then it's hard to do, I'm sorry, what?
It's all
changes, but they also don't adopt the whereas clauses.
Yeah.
The original one was only 6 pages.
They're not going to do 45 pages, but what they will do is, I think they do a page before and a page after that they charge you for. So really, there's no way to really estimate what they're going to charge because of what change they make. Like Randy said, they're not going to go line by line. They're just going to make the changes they need to, but then they're going to add in the additional pages. So, I mean, I could look up a previous, something similar in
I didn't know they had a cost factor put in for each page. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they do, but then we don't know how many pages that's going to take them.
Their pages aren't like our pages.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a request? We're halfway through the meeting. Can we take a quick 5-minute break?
We sure can. Right, it is 7:28. Zoom at 7:35.
Okay.
Everyone, we're back. Now we are on to agenda item 2, which is agenda item that Mr. Baker will actually enjoy talking about. And that is a discussion of buoys installed and maintained at Bel Air Shore Beach accesses. I actually added it to the agenda, to the work session agenda because Mr. Banker was not available at our last meeting. However, based on Mr. Banker's request, I decided to pursue this, and I addressed the Bel Air Shore Commission concerning this, and the way that I presented it was not speaking specifically for the city in committing to anything. This was more of a what-if scenario. And so I asked him the question, and I think Mr. Baker has asked him the same thing in writing, and he's also gone and spoken. Can we provide you with buoys in your town? And we fully fund it and maintain it. And the answer was yes, they would allow us to do that. And then I said, okay, I will bring this information back to the council, and I will see what the council would like to do. So my initial thoughts on this before we get into discussion on it, I wanted to go ahead and share my thoughts was that Bel Air Shore, even though we do not own that property, that is our beach too. And I feel that 100 yards of buoys on the north end. I would fully support putting them on the south end. But it comes at a price. And I would like for the city manager to give us a rundown on what we're expecting to pay to do a project like this.
Can I just briefly say one thing? I wasn't at the Bel Air Shore meeting, I spoke to what a bunch of residents were, and they said you did a super job expressing the safety for the people of Lincoln, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Reefer?
So the costs involved, you're looking at, I calculated 16 for our swim zone. For them to extend all the way down to the south jurisdiction, it'd be better to do about 18 markers. And the price for that is roughly around $5,000 for the markers themselves, with the shipping.
And that covers their entire beach or only the accesses?
That would cover the entire zone, like continuing our zone all the way down to
All the way down to First Street, correct?
Yes, and then for the installation, I got a recent quote from who usually comes in lowest. And for our 16 markers, we're looking at $20,000, $2,800. So I'm assuming because it's a whole day's work, it's going to be roughly the same, whether it's 2 more movies or not. We're very close to it.
Can you repeat how much it was going to cost?
So, $20,800 for installation and $5,000 for the markers shipped.
And that is all the way, that is completely covers all of Bel Air Beach.
Yes, but for their
Including off the Bel Air Shore portion.
First to Harrison.
that would cover from 1st to 19th.
Right.
There's,
Okay, so that's only the southern.
their half,
Okay.
20,000 you said installation,
yes.
and 5,000 for the markers down there.
Yes.
That's 16 workers.
18.
I do 18 on their side.
So, and then what's the cost for 19th to Harrison? I'm just curious about the project.
Give or take, it's roughly the same thing, basing the numbers off what I did for our swim zone.
Okay.
There's might cost,
So $50,000.
more. Yes.
So now, what's just the one single number ballpark that we're paying for, our city's paying for, in order to get the buoys from First and 19th Street, the Bel Air Shore side?
I'd say 27, you said.
27,000?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the new buoys being put in, installed, ready to roll?
Yes.
Okay, 27,000.
Now, on top of that, let's just say we reset the clock on the lifespan of these buoys. You said they're good for how long on average? A couple of years?
Couple of years, I'd say at least 1 year. In our last batch, we didn't start seeing them go away until 2 years, but that kind of depends on what the storm cycle is. Average 1 to 3. Say we get a pretty rough storm, our first year out, could change that.
Because they start staggering a little bit, but eventually, say maybe year 3 there, they will all have been replaced.
I would say replace on a 3-year cycle.
So it's not a inexpensive pill to swallow, but I still stand behind whatever we do for the north, we should do for the south, even though it's not our beach, because our citizens, our residents are walking across the street, and once they cross the access, just because they have to leave their umbrellas there doesn't mean that they're not swimming everywhere else.
Yeah, they drink.
That they're not putting chairs out on the sand. So they use their beach just like we use our beach. And again, whatever we do for the city needs to be for the entire city and not just for the north or the south, is my opinion.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know who the contractor is that did the work previously, but if I can pass these pictures out.
Tom, has the technology changed any since the last time we actually dealt with buoys from the standpoint of there's newer technology out there that will hold those buoys in place better?
They usually break at the hardware that connects the buoy to whatever the anchoring it over time.
And what I'm showing you is one picture of a buoy that washed ashore, and there's other ones that have the same thing. If you, I don't know if you guys know anything about rigging, but you can see there's a shackle that's in that picture. You can see there's a stainless steel wire tied to the eye of the bolt of the shackle that screws it into the journal of the other shackle. Well, this clever, fraudulent, I could use some other words, tied that retaining pin so it wasn't all the way in to the shackled shoulder. Why would you do something like that? Because if the buoy moves back and forth on the chain, it causes a friction and ruts and deteriorates the throat, especially with shoulders or the threads, okay, which breaks loose. Now that bolt, shoulder is always screwed in. That would have never failed. Further, there's a stainless steel eye on the buoy, and it's a carbon shackle. So the carbon's going to rust. And this is why buoys fail. And this was a deliberate fail. I reported these things to the FWC, they don't really care. But I gave numbers to the towns, the buoys or they must have a permit number on them and everything like that. Someone should go after this contract for installing stuff like this.
Is that our buoy?
No, this was up in Sandkey.
Yeah, those didn't last long, the ones they put in Sandkey, they lasted about a month.
Yeah. But it's something like that, with seawater, it'll chew that chapel right out.
I guess if going after a leaking form, can we get samples of the work, and if they could bring in a sample going, this is how we get them.
Yeah.
There's a best practice that Indian Rocks uses as well that I took from them. It's all stainless steel hardware. It was specified when we get the quotes. In my experience, the contractor we've used 2 times now has done what he was told to do. I haven't seen anything contrary to that, but it's definitely something to be expected before.
No, I'm not faulting our past city manager or anything like that. I mean, he's not out there doing this. I mean, this is, you throw it in the water, once you go under there and inspect it. And I will.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, yeah, I'm fine with that. If I could ask those, can we say, let's take the entire project, like you said, from First to Harrison, and put that into our current city budget so we can see basically, it's more a thought process to see what it will do in the out years. Say if we every 2 years, we have to do a replacement and put that number in there for us, just to get a kind of a good feeling about what we can expect. But I mean, I agree with you. It's like you're swimming, you're going to drift, and we did that to protect people, so make sure we got the buoys going all the way up.
We budget $5,000 a year for buildings.
Yeah.
Right now. But I commend you wanting to do this from First to Harrison. Is that really necessary? You know what I'm saying? Because talking to FWC, they don't really have a 100-yard requirement. They don't even have a requirement that you can bring your boat. You can't bring the boat in right at the buoy, okay? But if the buoy is 100 yards past, then you can bring the boat, and it's enforced by the County Sheriff's. So my whole thing was to keep the weekend warriors coming in drunk or whatever like that. And technically, I mean, we've had people come here and say, I'm going to lose my voting privileges and that. If we spread them out just a little bit, why can't we sell a permit to our voting residents for $5 and they can still bring their vote in where it's not enforced?
They can't, so they can bring the vote in presently as long as it's not under powered motor based on the public bathing beach that you folks established. So if it's not under wind power and it's not under motor power, the boat is allowed in in the public bathing beach you folks established.
That's what the ordinance is, but
Yes, sir.
FWC, I wrote to them and they sent back a written email saying, we don't enforce that. So, it's county sheriff.
Okay?
So if we modify something by saying, hey, look, you can bring the boat in, keep the buoys more than 100 yards apart. It's the imaginary line that keeps the weekend warrior and the person. People of Ballard Shores, people of Ballard Beach, you have no problem with seeing. It's I'm not against vacation or anything like that, but it's those.
We know who they're for, and we know what we're trying to do, and it's just basically establish a line of don't come flying through here in your boat. I think whenever we discuss this for the north side, the actual Bel Air Beach, whenever we tried to do spacing, there were complaints about, well, why am I in a boat zone? Why am I not in a boat zone? Why? You couldn't make everyone happy. And whatever it is we do, we just need to make it the same in uniform all the way down the beach. And of course, we need to see numbers, and this is not something we'll decide on immediately, but my question is does the council want to entertain this idea and at least start doing the research? Some things that are involved is that they have to have permitting also, and that does cost money, and we would be required to pay for that permit.
It doesn't, it's just time.
Okay, well, I think as far as from a legal perspective, that their attorney is more than happy to step up and help this project.
And to that extent, we will certainly need some kind of, I would strongly advise that we have some kind of interlocal agreement.
That was the last thing I was going to say was that.
And I know that was a source of.
Interlocal would need to be modified, and this would be a good time to actually look at both of our interlocals. And I think that this would be a goodwill project that would probably help us to resolve some of the issues that we have with our current access interlocal agreement.
Absolutely. Mayor, you got my support.
I have some questions.
Yeah, sure.
So, is Bel Air Shores willing to put in place the same ordinance we have in place?
And that's what we need to discuss.
So we don't know.
Because they do know that it would require an ordinance change. They are aware of that. And so that's where the city manager and the city attorney do their job and go ahead and give all the information and be transparent and see if they're really interested in allowing us to do this. Obviously, it's a great deal for them, but on the other hand, we use their beach way more than they use their beach.
Could we, because there's kind of a viewpoint of they review our ordinance and aren't willing to put that in place, can we ask them to review our ordinance and see if we get council agreement that that's something, because there's no point in us spending a lot of time on this if they're not even willing to accept the ordinance as it's written, or if it's something similar, because we're going to need that for the permit. And then what I heard Kyle say was it's about $52,000 to do this project, and the buoys last a year to maybe 3 years. So is that a $52,000 a year ongoing maintenance project? And if that is, we have a lot of deferred infrastructure that really is vying for that money more than buoys for someone else's property.
And that's why I bring it to the council.
So just things that are going off the line as we're talking about it. So just kind of that, and then, so I think before we even spend too much time thinking about budgeting it, we probably should say, are they going to be agreeable to the ordinance? This is
And
my-
that's where I think that from an official capacity, you would be see what she thinks and see if they're still interested. I have a feeling that they don't vote up to their beach. I don't think that they're going to have a problem with that, but I could be wrong. There's a resident here tonight who brought that up. He challenged me on that, whether they would actually go for it or not. So this is where it starts, and I just, before we even begin this, I wanted to see if this was something that the council was even interested in. Everybody get started, just asking the questions. You, Ms. Stone, you look like you have doubts.
I do, I have similar concerns to our Vice Mayor, but if we can just look and see as recommended, that's fine.
Mr. Baker, do you have the final word on this topic?
I think Bel Air Shores would be very agreeable to about 5 buoys. I don't know if I can be first. According to what Mayor Smith said, there's some room. I think one of them said, well, I have a 3-foot yacht and I can bring a shore and everything like that, which could outside those markers.
Good luck with that.
But, hey, like I said, you did a great job on what I heard. I think the conversation should proceed.
Okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Roberts.
I just have a couple more questions about the maintenance part of it. So let's assume we do the entire project. 2 years down the road, we're talking about doing it again, but is part of that still reusable? I mean, there's some out there that have been there how long? Those buoys that are,
We're down to maybe 4 or 5. It's like a half one.
okay.
Um,
And those 4 or 5 are actually still in the ground where they were
They're
originally?
there, since we're doing new markers, we have to pull out the old ones because we got different signage on them.
Right.
So it'll kind of be a test to see how much effort it takes to break those free. When you go out there for install.
Sure. So again, so we put the new ones in and we're 2 years down the road, we don't really have to change anything. If some of them come loose and wash ashore, we don't really have to buy a new buoy, right, necessarily. So just whatever failed to allow it to go into the shore, I don't know if maybe just one of these, broke loose, something to that effect.
It's the anchors, I think, is the problem.
Right.
Over time, they start burying themselves.
Sure, and they've been in that salt water for a while, and it's not a great mix there, so. I guess my point is, it's probably not gonna be, let's say we spend $27,000 initially on the Bel Air Shore area, and assuming that the cost would remain the same, I don't think we would spend $27,000 2 years from now. Because we're still gonna reuse some of those things, if in fact they even came loose.
Just want to repair the ones that break rather than redo the whole system, right?
Yeah, I want to check with Indian Rocks to see, I think they do it more on an annual basis.
Okay.
But you wouldn't want to go like 3 years and start losing them and do your 3-year install, and then all of a sudden the rest are really.
Yeah, we could still budget for it, so that we're covered, but, years ago, we didn't have to spend all that money, it would carry over. I think just to make that assumption that it's gonna be $27,000 every 2 years or every year, just for Bel Air Shores, I'm not sure it's gonna be that much, I hope. So, all right.
Are ours drilled in or are they on,
A concrete block, I mean, in a tub, about like 8 inches high, I have pictures of them. That's the cheaper way to go, or you could put the helical devices in, once it breaks free, they'll find it again. I wanted to get a quote from divers that do the helical, if there's a way to mark it out, so we find connection points, so over time, that's a more economical way, because it's more expensive because you're not just dumping an anchor into the water, you're paying divers to actually get down in there. But maybe if it's something that we're planning on maintaining over a longer stretch, if it does make more sense, we'd be able to relocate.
like Clearwater has pilings put in, instead of like a fall
I just got the permit for the markers, but I can reach back out and see if it's an option.
I didn't know if you had something on the top of your head, it's good for
We have piles on this side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something to consider. Let's begin with the permit or the ordinance rather, and see if they're even interested at all. And I will, I'll try to reach out to them. Sometimes they're here, sometimes they're not. They're sometimes hard to find, but I'll see what I can do. Any more discussion on this?
Yes.
We're ready. We're on item 3, discussion to include an invocation at meetings. This was placed on the agenda by Councilmember Roberts. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, sir. I thought about this for a while. I don't know why I didn't bring it forward sooner. So shame on me. But I did have a couple of conversations with Mr. Moore. I wanted to just run some ideas past him regarding some of his experiences with other cities that he works with, how they handle it, things like that. So I got some good feedback from him. But I think, Mr. Mayor, if we could just kind of get a feeling for how everybody else feels about doing this. And then I've got some different ideas as to how we may proceed if it looks like everybody's in favor of that.
Ms. Matera.
I think it would be a welcome addition to our meetings.
Thank you. And Ms. Roberts, we know where you stand. Ms. Livingstone.
I'm in agreement, I think it's a welcome addition.
Ms. Shirley.
I think it's a great idea. I'm disappointed I didn't think of it.
Mike Zabel.
When I've heard these before, I use the term invocation. Invocation is a summoning of a deity. Whether you use God, Jesus Christ, which frankly, not everybody believes like it. Religion is deeply personal. The reason for the United States is because the government practices religion. They have a state-sponsored religion. And frankly, I spent a year in Iraq where the government, 6 times a day, broadcasted a call to prayer, which following that was gunshots. And frankly, there are over thousands of churches around here, but there's only one city hall. That city hall should be for everybody, not just evangelists. You know, Jews, for example, they don't read the New Testament. No, just verse 5. They don't use the term God. Jesus Christ is not a savior. In fact, you can't use the word God. It's Hashem, G, etc. What I'm telling you is we just got through 3 years of hell of people arguing, enemies. Some have breached the lines and we reached across and some of that. But frankly, I don't want to have an invocation at our meetings, and I'm moving to table.
Thank you very much. Mr. Baker.
Well, I'm 100% in favor. On our money, it says in God we trust. The beginning of the Constitution, or when you're forming the Constitution, it was in the year of our Lord. Okay? And I was actually saying a prayer during halfway to the sign where it said we have a power failure. So I'm 100% in favor.
Thank you. I am also behind this. In fact, I'm like Vice Mayor Shirley White, and I say something. I did an informal survey with some of the residents around the city of Bel Air Beach, and they were for it but afraid of it. And the reason why they were afraid of it was only because they were afraid we would be sued. And so what I did was I just did a 10-minute search on the internet, and it looks like the Supreme Court will back us up because it's considered free speech. I have been called on by the Mayor's Council of Pinellas County twice to do the invocation, and I was very proud and honored to do it. But I've also had to watch others do it, and not everyone believes the same thing that I do. And I respect everyone and their position of where they stand religion-wise. And I think most people that do the invocation are going to be smart enough to make it as generic as possible, where you still, there's some spirituality involved, but you're not trying to be offensive to others who think differently or believe differently than you do. I think ultimately it has the same outcome, and it's a great way to start a meeting, so I am 100% behind this.
Excellent. Again, I did have some discussions with Mr. Mora, and he assured me that he's been involved with other cities that do this. So, coupled with what you said about going online and taking a look, I think I don't see any issues. I did look online as well for some, for lack of a better word, a template, which really brings the question, who do we want to be, and I didn't say invocation, I just say prayer. Who do we want to be involved in actually opening the meetings with a prayer? And again, with my conversation with Mr. Moore, I would bring up some different ideas. He would explain to me his thoughts on what I was potentially recommending. It seemed like the best thing for our city, because there are some cities, as an example, that maybe have 15 churches in their city. So they will invite ministers from the various churches. We don't have that. So at the end of the day, I felt like the best thing for us to pursue would be the council members who wanted to participate would actually say the prayer. Now, one thought that I had was there's prayer templates available out there. Many of them, I would say, but they're all similar and they're designed specifically for cities and counties and organizations like that. So they're very careful. I do not want to water it down based on my beliefs. At the same time, I don't want to cross any lines and cause people to feel uncomfortable. So what I'd like to suggest, if it's okay with all of us here, is to put together a template as to the prayer that would be used at our meetings, with all of us knowing that, this would just be a template. If there's certain things that are going on in the world, or certain things that are going on in our city, that we believe, or the person who's reading that night feels like it would be appropriate to add something else to it, I think we should allow that leeway in there. But I could put this template together and work with Randy to make sure he thinks it's fine. And then with that document, I could get that to everybody else out there to take a look at it and see what everybody's thoughts are. So how do you guys feel about that, where anybody who wanted to, we would just have a schedule that said this month's meeting, council member X will be handling the prayer.
So you're saying it would be the same prayer every month except if there's new?
Yeah, and there would be some leeway in there. I just think it's a structure to follow. A lot of it is pretty much common sense, but we're asking for guidance and strength, to help our city, that type of a thing. So that's my thoughts.
Let me go back to, you said all. I'm definitely against it. Don't even count me. Second of all, you're ostracizing me if I decide not to participate. In fact, talking like this will play the devil's advocate, which people are starting to think, oh my God, he's against God. Said, look, I do it. Again, it's deeply personal. If you want to get into all of it, we can even talk about that if you want. But again, I also requested we table this, and you didn't pass my motion. It's deeply divisive. And you're starting to say templates again, using loaded terms, Jesus Christ, God. Yes, we're under God. In fact, we say that during the Pledge of Allegiance, obviously. However, we don't mandate a religion, which you're doing by saying, in Jesus Christ's name, or, in God's name. What about Allah? I mean, playing devil's advocate again. Look, there's a lot of problems there. And I'm just telling you from my standpoint, as a member of this council, I don't need God's permission to do anything. If you're an engineer, we fire engineers that think God's going to handle it. No. numbers. It's a yes or no. And again, I want to table this motion.
Okay, we have I'm sorry, I did not hear you say table
Oh,
early on.
no.
However, we have a motion on the table. Would anyone like to second this motion, or shall we continue this conversation?
Continue the conversation.
All right, the motion dies. So please continue, Mr. Taylor.
No, it's a process, so that's fine, I understand. Thank you.
Going back to the Mayor's Council of Pinellas County, whenever they asked me, they said, you can do your own, or if you'd like, we can provide you with one. I will be more than happy to email tomorrow to get a copy of it for you.
Okay.
I will pass it off to you, and you can do your thing.
Can I just add, I travel the state pulling permits in front of many cities, municipalities, typically requires a land use change, zoning, I'm in front of councils in many, many cities. And I think ours is the only city I've been in front of that does not have some sort of prayer at the opening of the council meeting. Just food for thought.
But there's also many that do not.
I've been to both.
Yeah.
Whenever I do a big city meeting, we do not do the prayer. Whenever I do the mayor's council meetings, we do. I also noticed that Pinellas County does. They do a prayer at the beginning of theirs. So it's a little all over the map, but I have felt bad that I couldn't at least feel better prepared at the beginning of the meeting, and even though Councilmember Zabel doesn't really agree, I think that it sets the tone and kind of calms everybody down to be prepared for a good meeting. Knock on wood, this is a great council. I'm very proud of all of you, and I hope that this doesn't damage our future, but I do feel very strongly about it. And thank you very much for bringing it up.
And I'll just give you a backup on that is, look, I respect the council, absolutely. You know, whatever they do, I'm behind them. Absolutely on that. But please respect my thoughts as well. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And to your point, Mike, I kind of agree with the, assigning it to council members, because I can tell you, I have a pretty strong opinion on my beliefs, and I'm not gonna water it down. So, that, I may not be the best person to offer, it's my point, the invitation. So, just in fairness, right? So, and to your point.
And you should, that's fine, yeah.
Right, and so, just think that through, so that's my own thought.
And I like what you said, Mr. Mayor, regarding when you were asked, they said you could give your own, or you could use one that they had in place.
Yeah, and I think the reason why they give you that option is because some people aren't comfortable with creating, writing down their thoughts and doing a public prayer, whereas they probably, again, I've never seen it. I may have heard it, I wouldn't know if it was the prepared one or if someone wrote it, but I'll get it and take a look at it, and you guys work on something, and let's talk about it. It doesn't require anything. I don't believe there's anything about it in our charter that says we can. So let's move forward.
What were you asking? You were asking size of contact?
Well, I'm going to hand off because I can't contact you, just,
Okay.
right, the canned invitation, and then you can look at it whatever you want to with it. It's just an example.
I got it, right. Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion on item 3? All right. Now we're on to item 4. Are we good on time? We got 45 minutes. Pretty good. This is discussion of holiday Display lighting on Gulf Boulevard. I placed it on the agenda knowing that the Bel Air Beach Community Foundation had big plans to try to fund some of this, if not all of it. However, I was afraid that because they're a new organization, they probably wouldn't be able to do it for at least a couple of years, because it takes time to build up the kitty. And I've also had several residents during the holiday season that said, everyone else has lights, and we look like a bunch of Scrooges. Why don't we have lights here? And so I assured everyone that reached out to me that I would put it on the work session to discuss it. So here we are. And Kyle, would you like to give an update on our situation?
Okay, so I put together a map just to kind of show where we're at. About 3 months ago, my staff went out and located all the poles that had existing outlets on them and determined which ones actually had power still running to them, which ones didn't. Since then, I started discussions with Duke Energy, telling them, okay, this is what we have. I asked them what would the cost be to repair the ones that don't have power to them anymore. Some time went by, and then when I reached back out to them again, I found out that they were actually in the process of repairing the ones that had outlets that didn't have power, so they took that on themselves to get power back to it.
Nice.
So they, at that time, they're like, it should be all complete within a week. And then, so what this map shows is all the green is the existing outlets that were still there that they now have working. I do not know, I can imagine there was an outlet at 5th Street. Maybe not definitely at 12th Street, 16th Street. I don't know if over time that wear and tear that it separated is no longer there. But I reached back out and I'm trying to get a price for what they're going to charge if we want to add some outlets to those. Because the way I laid this map out, the bare minimum, if we just kept the pattern, you can go up to at least 25th, but I think that leaves a lot of parts of the north of the city that kind of would be a big gap. Maybe, you could stop there, or I tried to draw up what would be ideal based on where the light poles were. The best spacing to sort of maintain a uniform display throughout Gulf Boulevard. So that ended up getting me, I have 19 existing outlets that we have to add. Per this plan, if it's something that you think is acceptable, it would be an additional 17 proposed outlets. Again, I need to know from Duke Energy what they're going to cost. And the other big question is how it coincides with the undergrounding.
And that was my fear, is that we would do all this planning and work, and then they would take things down.
Yeah. And the way Duke is, Miriam Tucker, who I deal with for underground planning, they're all departmentalized, so she has to get in touch with the lighting department. I naturally want to assume that they wouldn't go fixing all these outlets if they were going to turn down in once, but I still don't know the answer to that, so I want to make sure.
And this is what was the last part of this?
So they took it on themselves to repair all these outlets that didn't have power, but I just was asking, what it would take. We're not saying that we're going to use any holiday decorations this year or anytime in the near future. So I want to assume, which I probably shouldn't, but that they wouldn't go repair something they were going to rip down in a matter of months.
Right.
But again, I need the answer for that.
Now, is there any plan at all to, what's the goal with the street lighting? Are you just going to leave it as is and you're not going to change anything?
Right now, with the plan of undergrounding all the wires, they're going to top the poles and put caps on them. You can have the existing wood poles, which I don't have the count on me right now. I think it is there was probably only 9 poles that were gonna go away that didn't have streetlights on. And the rest, you know, you're looking at 80, 85, 90 wooden poles with the lights staying on top so that they're shorter. There's been discussion and getting pricing on solar. The problem with the solar is the arms on them are not as long, so you're gonna have to put the solar lights a lot closer to the roadway, which can pose a problem. Plus, currently right now, we do all the solar maintenance in the city, and maintaining solar lighting on golf boulevards is a little different than 22nd Street.
Have we asked Duke, I know we're getting on another subject, but for the cost to replace those light poles with concrete poles or metal poles as part of our streetlight plan and what that might look like?
I
Because
did,
it's usually a lease agreement.
it is, to go, the last time they gave me to go from a wooden pole to a concrete pole was, to add a concrete pole was, that didn't exist was $7,000. I think the price that was $4,000, go from the wood to the existing one. So it's still,
Do we know what that lease looks like? I mean, just food for thought, let's kind of look at like some options on streetlight plans for after undergrounding, what that looks like. Because
And
they're
that's
gonna have some like
exactly where I was going.
Yeah.
I don't want to invest all this money to
fixtures that,
do Christmas decorations for 2 years and then we rip it all out and have to redo
and
it.
instead of having 19 holes, we end up with, I don't know, 10, you know, or something,
Right.
yeah.
I am definitely all for lining the place up, but also, those decorations are not cheap.
No.
They're very, have you priced them?
they price from about $500 to $1,000. So with the number, we're looking at, if we kept what we have existing, we're looking at about 20,000. If we add as many to stand in the city, we're looking at about 36,000 in the lighting.
It's a major commitment, so if we do this, we definitely want to.
How would that lighting banner across Causeway, right?
We have a bucket truck to install these.
We always rent all those.
We only have how many personnel?
2 full-time. And then hopefully this week, we'll pass all the employee screening for the new hire of the community services administrator.
Okay. Well, I guess what we need is more information on underground and what's really going to happen. I think it's too soon to commit to anything as far as the line goes. Obviously, there's a plan that they will help us get electricity, but if it's just temporary and we decide to change things out, in a future work session, I think we should decide and discuss and decide whether we do want to do something with these poles. And it's just too bad Nellis County couldn't give us more. You know?
You can still ask.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, that would be nice.
All right, again, this was just it's not really an action item, it was just a discussion, but hopefully this will give us something that we can go back to our constituents and say, hey, we're talking about it, and we're still trying to work out a plan. All right, next up, Councilmember Zabel put, let's see, converting to Park Mobile or other mobile parking app. Take it away, Mike.
Sure. We looked at parking and we thought, my preliminary thought was, can we save money by removing all these signs? As I was saying, okay, sign maintenance, we have to replace them, we have maintenance of the parking meters with something Park Mobile, which actually cities to our left and our right, inland, use Park Mobile. And it's very easy because frankly, all the accounting is now removed from in-house to an external agency that does all of the accounting for you. And people are used to it, they know how to use it. The police force, our sheriffs, they know how to use it. And going through the numbers, they're fairly conservative. There is some minimal savings, at least with Park Mobile. There's additional savings with another company.
But the one thing that stuck out was the cost to maintain the parking meters. That's done by our city manager. I think you're talking 5 hours a month minimum to maintain, repair, and the problem comes in when you don't have a repair part, you gotta trace it down. Look, the object is, we hired him, he's doing a great job, but he needs to get out of the job of parking maintenance man. And that's why I brought this up. We talked to, well, 2 companies, and the numbers so far, they work out to, again, if no savings, there's a minimal savings, or could be more from going to these companies with that idea. But the big savings comes in no longer having to maintain the parking machines. Kyle, what was your thought? Because like I said, we went back forward on this, you'll see some of the emails.
So yeah, if you look at our costs of parking meter maintenance, it's something really non-departmental. And if you look at the actual, I'm sorry, it's not budget in front of you. The actual for last, for 20 to 21 budget year was 16,283.
What was that? What made up that number?
That was subscription fees, parts, upgrades for the meters. Periodically, they upgrade the networks that they're going on, so we have to upgrade them a little bit.
So
We pay for an ongoing parts program. That's where it involves the time. I can give you a breakdown of the individual costs. But with the parts program, it's beneficial because you're recycling parts, but it still involves the time of every time something breaks. You have to troubleshoot it. You have to go from one meter to the other. And you have to drive the part to a swap out, which is in almost by 49th Street.
And we spent, what, 16,000 on that for maintenance, right?
That's the cost of the maintenance fees. That's not including the time involved.
Was that for
No,
2022, you said?
That was 2021 was the 16.
And was that the modem year?
Yes,
And did we buy the modems?
we did. Yeah, we own the
Okay,
machine.
so I don't expect that to happen again, but we're just curious.
21 to 22 was 15,924. I can break these down, but we're not budgeting enough money for what we're spending.
And how much are we bringing in?
I'm looking at last year's actuals, 164,000. I'm trying to
Yeah,
see the
that sounds
cost.
right.
How much?
164,000.
How many hours is that? Anybody? What I'm saying is, when I'm looking at it, it's going to cost us 68 cents an hour to build a park. We're paying 60, you know what I'm saying? We're paying 16,000. Savings here is a regular cost, you know?
Yeah, briefly, the looks we did was, it doesn't, it's very, if at all, it's minimal.
Park, so it's about 10%. Parking meter expenses are at 16,000.
But you're also paid for credit cards.
Also, I'm paying 68 cents for every hour, okay? Or
I'm just
somebody else, yeah.
giving you some actual
Yeah,
line
yeah.
numbers.
But here's the thing is, the mayor talked earlier, and it was a really good point. Sometimes we don't want the people to park here. And what you do, and I don't know, these are outside. Inside, you got your parking pass, you're good. You're free to park anywhere you want. Obviously, you don't violate the laws. But for these outside people, you can, at the touch of a button, change the rates. You can increase rates for holidays. You can back them off a little bit for a weekend. You can basically afford to charge outside people more. And it's basically it's an economic decision. Do you want to park here? Do you want to go to the beach? Okay, well, it's going to cost you X for the parking. But again, going back to it, it's the biggest saver in all of this is Kyle's time. And we all agree that we value his time and the staff's time, and that's one less thing that we can remove, which is an immediate savings, and still provide the parking and maintain the income that we've been basically kind of banking on.
Now, no matter what service we choose, whether we stay with who we're with now or if we move forward with Park Mobile, I would not expect Kyle to do this because he's now the city manager.
Well, his
So
replacement.
whoever he hires, they
Yes.
would be responsible for this.
I agree, yeah.
So-
It's about $18,000 worth
What's
of,
that?
it's about $18,000 worth of salary, it was a 5-hour week, you said? or-
A month, sorry.
A month, okay.
Still, it's a lot of
Still a
money.
lot, yeah.
And time, and time is everything in this job, and we understand that you're doing it now to your replacement, plus you gotta train the replacement, et cetera. This is not the only company, frankly, we don't have full-blown estimates. We want to get this, again, just like we're talking about everything else tonight, into the discussion, so we can go ahead and dig, more into that, and then bring the companies in, going, okay, here's our typical thing, what are you coming forward, and is there a competitive offer, so you can really do see the numbers involved. And that's really the critical decision point, so you can see, okay, are we going to lose money? Are we going to stay even? Perhaps make more? I mean, my preliminary numbers, yeah, they look fine, but you got to really get them in here. And what's really nice is, at least the two agencies, well, one agency already has the contract for the area, so it's just a matter of tying on to Clearwater's contract to go forward. And frankly, their infrastructure, just the signs, I believe they did for the signs, the initial setup. I have to check. Yeah, we gotta check. But it's, again, we're starting to look at this. And thought this would be a good, thought process going forward.
Would anyone like to speak on this topic?
Well, if you take the 145,000 that we brought in, you divide it by $5 an hour, and you take 68 cents, it's gonna cost us about $19,700 to go to Park Mobile. We're paying $16,000 now. And we're probably spending about $1,500 to $2,000 for labor to maintain. So it's gonna cost us probably about $1,800.
You're gonna be off. Why is we are also charging credit card fee because you're using credit cards on this machine. That's where really the fee is. With Park Mobile and.
Well, I added all that in, 68 cents an hour.
So,
Look right there on both sides.
can I
Yeah,
Let me give you a little history, and then I will continue to call on everyone. Vice Mayor Shirley probably remembers this. One of the things that we are able to accomplish with our meters is that we put a cap on how much time someone can be on the beach.
Okay.
All right, so if you switch to Park Mobile, you can't do that.
Yes, you can.
Well, so it just won't let them, it won't let them renew.
It gives you a max, yeah.
There are Park Mobile
You can modify.
jurisdiction to jurisdiction, you can vary even within zones.
All that.
Within a jurisdiction, some zones you can't renew, all of them have a cap. For example, as you come through Clearwater, down Myrtle, the main roadway, if you're parking for 8 minutes or less, it's no charge, then it's an hour minimum after that. And you can only park, I think, on something like 3 hours or something, 4 hours. So you do have the ability with that contractor to.
And this would be, if we did this would be the only one that I would even consider because it's already on my phone.
So I was gonna say, if you have the app, right, and then I don't know what happens with, I think the credit card charge probably doesn't pass through the city because you have an app and it's already loaded.
No,
right?
it's coming through the Twins, yeah.
Yeah.
So
but
I had a,
No, it needs to be spelled out.
quickly, I don't know if anyone's here from Hibiscus.
Yeah.
They had a comment. There were two people, I think they.
Greg was talking about.
I did receive one that said, let's see here, disagree with parking app at Bel Air Beach Marina, but I don't know why. She didn't state why. So, anyway, other comments?
It seems like, how many parking places do we have?
Or,
How many?
we have this building, Bayside Park,
Not spaces,
Yeah, 12
areas.
parking.
12 parking spaces at all the locations. I think they say that the Marina can do 70, maybe more. Morgan Park, I would say is like 30 something, 34. And then you're out here is maybe 15, 16,
Okay.
and this is 52. And
It's a real convenient app to use if you haven't used it.
Yeah, I've used it
yet.
around other cities. I don't know, just the gut feel, it just seems like, you know, I get Clearwater. I mean, I can't even imagine how many, you know, parking spaces they have for people paying. We're just kind of small, so.
How long have we had those machines?
first one,
Not that
this
long.
first one was based out of the Theater 1, and the second was the Marina. The newest one is here, and that was in 2018. Morgan, I think, was somewhere between 10 and 15. So the oldest one's got to be probably like 06. I can get those numbers.
I think the other opportunity it lends itself to is people, if you're on the beach, you may not get up and put money back in the machine, and chances of getting ticketed are pretty slim. Whereas if you have the app and you get a notice that your time's up, I think we'll collect more money because of the convenience of paying through a mobile app.
You tend to overbuy too, because
Yeah.
you can't get the refund.
Right.
You put in 4 hours, they have to pay for 4 hours.
Right.
Well, it's the same machine.
I think the only thing that we're really missing here is the math.
Right.
And
Yeah,
this is
that's why you want to start.
I don't have a problem with taking a serious look at this, listening to the presentation, and looking at the hard numbers and seeing if it's actually worthwhile to do.
On spreadsheet.
Others,
Going back to what you said, Vice Mayor, I mean, the idea was not going to go back to the meter, to the money that was actually now, what we can now do.
so what they're saying is that it expires,
Yeah.
and then you can't renew.
Yeah, but then, so now we're going to say you're going to be on the beach for 2 hours, 3 hours. You know what I'm saying? Because you can't renew, what time would we be telling people?
I see what you're
You
going
know what I'm
with
saying?
this, yeah, because really you don't want to say that.
I know you don't want to say it, but I don't think
More-
I'm in
more
disagreement
defined.
with you in the whole entire city, is what I'm saying.
But it's okay to look for a pain threshold, that's basic economics.
Yeah, I think we can quickly
We
adjust.
will
the
find
num-
that main
adjust the
threshold.
numbers easily through an app program too. We can
Yeah.
make that adjustment quick and say, oh, well, this weekend's a holiday weekend,
Yep.
let's jack that price up.
Yeah.
Because we know people come to the beach and make more money. I mean, it's taxing our staff and police, everything is being
Everybody.
taxed on those very trying weekends. with
And the
so much
sheriff
traffic.
knows how to work with this app, they know how to check who's in, who's out.
They should be able to log in.
Yeah, I got all this stuff.
So what do you think, Coach? You're the one that deals with it more than anybody. What do you think?
My thoughts, I just wondered if there were any major objections of not allowing cash.
Well, that would eliminate it, right?
That would eliminate it.
Having that, they either have the app and pay for it, or they don't, you have to download the app. I've
Yeah.
been stuck in that situation, and I'm like, okay, I got this app, but I forgot my password, and I'm trying, and I set up,
I'll show you that.
Yeah.
And then you register your husband's truck
Right,
instead of your car.
Yeah.
exactly.
He's been, there's one other thought I did bring up,
But it's the
but
way of the future, I
I-
don't know.
I don't like having a lot of cash here. And that's what we're at right now. We're in this bank, and you start talking, pushing 100,000 through, and you're pushing a lot of that in cash back there. Vice here, no cash, nobody's attempted, no accounting.
So what was your comment though? Your comment was about the cash payments.
I mean, we have an older community, but most, in this area, they're mostly residential stickers. So I didn't know how you felt the reaction would be to eliminate being able to pay with cash.
Okay.
But I do believe it's where everything's going.
Is that allowed, don't you have to have some kind of avenue, $1 bill that says, is used for currency, all as public and private? So what I'm saying is, do you have to give a cash option somewhere?
I'm not,
There's
In
no-
as much as the question is a legal one, I'm not aware of that as a requirement per se in all government.
Well, I'm just saying, the
Functions, I
federal
would tell
memo
you.
says what it says.
No, I understand I understand that it says this is legal tender. I'm familiar with the same provision. I can also identify numerous governmental functions in which you are unable to pay with cash or coins. And so I'm not, were that the case, it'd be hard for me to conceive that it's that omnipresent at this stage. And even some government facilities, parking and the like. I'm happy to look into it, but I've not heard anything to that effect or seen some judicial opinion that binds all government to require acceptance of cash for all forms of.
IRS will not allow you to pay taxes in coin.
If that was the case, then City of St. Pete, City of Clearwater,
Washington DC.
everyone would be in jeopardy over that.
DC, that's all part of it.
If everybody's okay, say we allow him to move forward, provide us with some real numbers, and we have a little more discussion and bring somebody in. Is that okay? Okay. Item 6. It is 20 till 9. This one may take a while. We've gone down this road before.
Start. Okay, briefly. There's a waiting list for marina use. And there's two types of people. There's resident, I'm going to use that term, resident and non-resident owners, and basically everybody else. Somebody who lives in Clearwater wants to park their boat here. And currently, if you're on the list, if you do not have a boat that matches that size, say, and I'm just going to use a quick example, you got a 20-foot boat and it's a 40-foot slip, well, you don't qualify, so it goes to the next person. I just want to change that to give that person an option, much as you're not required to own a boat right now when you request it. I want the same option to apply to somebody in the city going, if I have a 20-footer and I'm next on the list, please contact me and give me the option to either accept it and buy a bigger boat. You got no choice in this. You can't park that 20-footer. You got to use what we have. Accept it, buy that bigger boat, and I'll have that bigger boat parked in 3 months. I'm going to go get a sale. Or saying, I'm not getting a bigger boat, therefore I can't accept this slot, so it goes to the next person on the list, next, again, I'm going to say Bel Air Beach person. But it gives them the option to upsize if they're next on the list. I'm just trying to, hit that because in some cases, we're seeing that a person in Bel Air Beach resident has a 20-footer, and because they don't meet the big 40-foot, that they're passed over without being notified. I want to give them a shot to upgrade the boat and take that slot.
Can I ask, how many people are on the wait list right now? Kayaks? I know it's a big number.
Yeah, I mean, this was brought up to me via a resident that was passed over, and he said, well, if I would have known, I would have bought a bigger boat, which is
So we have
nice
80,
try.
84. We have 29. The way the wait list works currently is you just have to own property to be on the top part of the list to be considered first. So you have 29 property owners, 55 do not own property in Bel Air Beach. And the way that the ranking goes currently is you get ranked highest if the boat you plan to put in that slip is the longest. So if you have a 33-foot boat, it's say number 2 on the list, another property owner in Bel Air Beach comes, has a 38-foot boat they want to put in, they're going to jump you on the list.
So, I guess, to Mike's point, why don't we offer it to the next guy on the list and say, this is the cost for the slip? I don't care how big your boat is. This is, if it's a 55-foot slip and we charge $1 a foot and it's 55, whatever. It's, just for simplicity, that's the price for the slip. I don't care how big the boat is.
The limiting factor on the slips are the beam distance. So most, everything has a lot of room behind it. So if you're charging by foot, as long as if you have a narrower sailboat that's long, it's hard to say exactly what the maximum is for that slip, because the maximum is limited by the width.
Okay, but you were just saying a 33-foot boat, so I was just doing a good, good comparison. If there's a slip for a 33-foot boat, and I'm on the list next with a 20-foot boat, and you call me and say, this is the price to rent this slip, are you interested or not? And that's based on what that slip will allow, not based on my boat.
So you're saying we find the biggest boat that could fit in that slip that we currently have on the
Next
list?
person on the list.
The next person on the
It's
list.
now Jody, and she's got a 20-foot little runabout. And there's a 40-foot slip. Jody, here's the price.
The slip isn't defined by the length, though, it's defined by the, so I'm trying to figure out how to say how much the.
She's got a tiny little thing, and the thing is big.
Okay, but let's apply that. If this slip number 10 can accommodate a 30 to a 40-foot boat, we put a price tag on that slip, whatever that is. I mean, maybe we need to look at that pricing for those people that are waiting and as the slips turn. Clearly people that are in the spots already, they have their price, they worked into that schedule we did a few years ago, and, they're in place. But anyone new, but trying to accommodate our property owners. How many slips do we have that are rented by non-property owners? Do we have any?
There's 3 or 4. So resident property owners, 9 slips rented. Non-resident property owners, 6 slips rented. And then non-property owners are down to 3.
Okay, so those 3 probably should get a notice that they have 6 months to move their boat, so we can accommodate our property owners too,
At those rates.
at whatever rate schedule we set up. But I mean, the marina is for our residents, not for, as much as I love it being a profit center, it's really for our residents, not for non-residents or property owners.
So is the fee based on the length of the boat or based on the length of the slip?
The length of the boat, being slip.
The length of the boat.
Length of the boat.
Is the length of the boat is what we
Yes.
charge now?
Yeah, by the foot.
Right. So
Right,
even if it's a 40-foot slip and they have a 20-foot boat, we're only charging them for the 20-foot boat.
Correct. Currently there's a minimum, the fee schedule's laid out in the last resolution.
Okay.
They would qualify for that 40-foot slip.
Right. Doing this.
They would be paying enough based on the footage.
Correct. In the slip.
So do you clarify what you were saying? Are you saying that we should be charging one set price for a slip that can accommodate a 40-foot boat and one that should
Well, I
accommodate a 20-foot boat?
just don't want us to pass over a resident of this house. So that might be a complicated, we've got someone in the audience that could
I can
probably
tell you
help
how
us
to do
figure
it.
that out.
You would have what we consider a minimum and a maximum footage
Right.
for that slip. So let's say it accommodates 25 to 35 feet. Your boat's 20 feet, well, you get the minimum,
The minimum.
which would be 25. And then you'll put your boat in there, but you're paying for 5 extra feet if you want.
And what happens typically, I rent the slip and I go buy a lift and I put it in there. So that maybe the beam, maybe it allows a beam of a 14-foot, beam or something ridiculous. I would size it down to accommodate my boat.
Well, it's the same theory as a single person buying a 4,000-foot square home, so paying the taxes for
Right,
it.
whatever it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, and that's what it is. So, I mean, the slip can accommodate, as the mayor said, 25 to 35 feet. You charge them at least the minimum, regardless if he wants to put a rowboat.
I agree that we should charge on the length of the slip,
Yeah.
regardless of what you as your boat owner and the renter wants to put in there. That's not my problem.
Right.
You want to put a tiny little boat in there?
No, I'm running with you. I mean, the way I wrote it was not like this, but this was an idea, yeah. I'm with you. Yeah.
We should do everything we can to accommodate the residents.
The residents.
I mean, I'd rather see them take it.
Because our residents are getting bumped in.
And they're paying the
Yes.
ones that are.
Yeah, actually,
Hold on a minute. We're gonna, if you want to address the council, just come on up.
Yeah, since we're on
Since
that.
you have
I
any.
appreciate it, I appreciate it, gentlemen and ladies. I'm the reason for this coming up on the agenda. I'm Jonathan Viola, 107 First Street. Everybody's been very helpful and I appreciate it, thank you. I came from a neighborhood, so I bought a house here 10 years ago, 11 years ago. Didn't realize, Kyle's been great, he let me know that I could have been on that list 10 years ago, but I didn't consider myself a resident, even though I bought the home. So now I move in a year and a half ago, said, okay, now I can get on the list, find out I'm at number 16, let's say. Well, this year, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble here, but I moved down from 16th to 24th on the list because people had bigger boats than I did. Not knowing that, I just went to the Tampa Boat Show. I'll buy a 35-foot boat if I can have a slip to put it in. My boat's 24 feet right now. So I'm a resident, willing to take any slip, pay any money to get in that slip for convenience. However, I understand from other neighbors, there's been a lot of time poured into this subject. So rather than reinvent the wheel, I came from a neighborhood that had 40 slips and 40 homes. And the neighbors worked very well together in shuffling. It was sort of first in, last out type of deal. And we had the exact issue that you're talking about where some slips were larger than others. Some people came in, they were new homeowners, they had bigger boats than people that had smaller boats, and we worked it all out by the first in, last out. And what happened, this was very complicated, and I don't suggest this, but we had a review every year that basically said, if you want to move your slip, these people are moving out of the neighborhood, the new people come in, they get last choice. And that's just how the list worked, and it worked very well. And everybody knew that a year from now, their boat fit their slip, but if a bigger slip came open, they were next in line. It was same theory, and I'm not trying to get complicated here, but you shouldn't be able to go backwards on the wait list. It's last in, last out, first in, same way a wait list always works. The issue is when it's my turn, if I don't want to take that slip or can't afford that slip, then I'm happy to pass it on to the number 2 person. But if I'm next in line, and a guy comes in from wherever and has a 40-foot boat, he shouldn't be able to jump me in line. I mean, that just makes no sense. So that's, sorry to make it more complicated, I hope it didn't confuse you even more, but.
No, actually, it makes perfect sense. Thank you very much for speaking.
Thank you for taking the time.
Hey, mind if I just throw a couple thoughts at you? I feel for him, I really do, and I think if I could just put this out there, slip size fees, the discussions on the marina, we can do this every couple of years. I like it coming up right now as you're doing the comprehensive plan and start looking at really incrementally, do we just want to make another decision or do we have a big city plan of what we want to do with that first? Secondly, I've always said if you just took a blank slate down there, that's where you get the decision of, boy, do we do what we've always done with 5 foot? Or do we really look at it, reconfigure it, and charge by the size of the slip? Unfortunately, you have people down there, so you're kind of caught in that middle ground. This piece, I don't think is fair. So there's something that has to be done that allows the list to prioritize maybe even residents, which goes back to the comprehensive plan talk. Should we have a marina that's not even 4 outside and phase that out? Should we limit number of boats or slips you could have? Should we talk about maybe the slip sizes again? It's really an interesting subject, but it starts with a little pain on someone who's watching themselves go from 16 to 24. I know I waited 7 years. I didn't move backwards on the list. I know that for a fact. So you're always welcome to ask me questions about competitive pricing, what have you, but
I think he's got a legitimate beef. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I mean, here, he's been a resident for 10 years. I really think we should be looking at somebody that's invested in this community for 10 years, or 5 years, or 20 years, and then buys a boat. Somebody just moves in there, why should they go on the list? You know what I'm saying? He should get some grandfather.
Well, that's what we're trying to do,
Yeah.
just rewriting this, but
Well,
I think the
he
vice
just
mayor's
needs to
pretty good
apply.
how to lay it out.
And there's definitely some problems. It's hard to ask someone to leave whenever you've told them, hey, you can keep your boat here, even though they're maybe not a resident. But there are certain things that I've always felt very strongly about that we should look at. Definitely, I think a non-resident should be the absolute last resort before a resident. And whenever I say resident, I don't mean rental owners. I don't mean people that invest in property and they live over in Tampa. I'm talking about people that live here in Bel Air Beach and that's what's on their driver's license. They should take first priority and they should always be at the top of the list. And the only reason why anyone not living here should be in that marina at all is because it's such a bad slip that nobody wants it. But also, I have a problem with more than one boat. If there's more than one, if you have more than one boat, well, that's the only spot you can get is one, not more than one. And I think we have that case right now. Is that right?
They get the titles under different names.
Same household, and neither lives here. Is that right?
Don't know exactly the background, but I would have to look.
Okay.
Well, Lloyd and I were gonna buy a boat, so.
It's nuts.
Yeah, well, my point is that if we had a firm stance on you must live here, that wouldn't happen at all. So,
Yes.
Obviously, there's some discussion that's going to be happening with the long-term strategy for our city, and I look forward to their recommendations, and then we can put our own spin on it and maybe come up with something that will accommodate the residents and not make them wait so long. Unfortunately, it's full, and it's hard to do the shuffling around whenever it's time to make rule changes. We just watched the Clearwater Yacht Club, and they got all new docks, all new slips, everything's brand new there, and it was an absolute nightmare for all the boaters because they had to find homes to put their docks in, private docks. They were begging their neighbors and their friends for just let me keep my boat here for a few months. And I think some of them are still not there because they're still working on power and things like that. So it's not easy, and you will be the most popular person if we go changing what we already have. But I think it's something that definitely we need to continue thinking about, talking about until we can come up with some workable solution that we're all happy with. And like Mr. Baker says, we put the residents at the top of the list, not number 27. I am so sorry that happened to you.
Thank you for hearing me.
But, yeah, I'm recommending Bill in the meantime, because, I mean, you kind of grind kind of slowly, which is good. I mean, we analyze, review. Can we rapidly change it so that the existing people don't get jumped?
If we change it, can he get back to 16 instead of 24? You know?
I'm fine with that. I mean, I just want to.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
Just do-
that's what we should be looking at.
Yeah, it's because it's this section right here about how the line stuff, that we just change that now. Obviously, everything else is long scope and we'll work on a comprehensive one. But for now, just addressing the landscaping part. And I like, Vice Mayor's idea where you say, no, you're not required to buy the boat, you're required to pay whatever that costs.
Absolutely.
And then if you don't, well, the wife says no, okay,
Then you lose it.
you go to the next guy, or husband.
Can I just add a couple of things, I guess, so we can move forward, because we don't have any information. It's that too.
Right.
The
Let's
parking-
have some.
Yeah,
hard
can we
numbers,
get
figures.
some actual numbers of current dock situation and then also what the waiting list looks like? And I think from what you just said, we've got 3 residents that, or 3 renters that are not property owners in the city. At least we can talk about that at a council meeting and maybe bring how we can handle those 3 to the forefront. And anyone that's a non-resident, should we even bother with them on a wait list? What's the point? Get rid of the non-property owner, non-resident wait list. Just have the property owner, Bel Air Beach residents on that wait list, period. There's no need to shuffle them around and have them on a wait list that they're never gonna get a spot anyway. And then once we start accumulating the information, we can start talking about dock prices and that sort of thing. I don't believe this is something the comprehensive plan will cover. They're talking about zoning and things like that. I mean, clearly, they don't get involved with the dock prices, correct?
There is a future vision of what the marinas meant. There is a section.
Okay, so that'll be up to you to push that and drive it,
Yeah, that's,
because I don't,
he's referring to, basically a facelift of the marina.
And saying that it'll, I can't remember the exact wordage. Do you remember it saying it will keep the
I don't remember the verbiage, there was a, planning and zoning meeting where they'd begun the process of workshopping comp plan amendments. A comp plan is a constitution for land development, and you start with policies and objectives in your comp plan. Policies and objectives like recreational elements, like the city remains committed to preserving the residential character of its, and preserving all parks and recreation, blah, 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 blah. And so there was some discussion about, within the Planning and Zoning Board, of inserting language to a policy to strongly favor the permanent retention of that marina, and have a policy that the city intends to and remains interested in maintaining a marina for the use of its natural resources by its residents, something along those lines. The general concern being that some future commission or body may look to just say, we could turn that into a Starbucks or something and eliminate this marina and have it be a comp plan element.
Thank you for that information.
so it's just a broad statement. It doesn't.
Policies and objectives,
Yeah.
the policies and objectives that
But I mean, I've
that
seen that
inform decision making.
where our comp plan said our stormwater, cost to repair a stormwater was a few $1,000s, and it wasn't. It was 300,000 or 3 million, or whatever it was in the section that we were focusing on. So it was a very broad statement, didn't give details, which is what I'm going to assume is going to be said.
Yeah. So what they're considering in the planning and zoning is if they want to get more details or offer up more of a vision for that property. So this is what they're going to say.
So again, you'll be the one driving that because we can't participate in those meetings.
Okay, so do we have any action items on this one agenda item at this time?
One person could participate. Kind of like when I got with Kyle, and we worked on one as a deal.
I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
I took a stab at this, I believe, 2 years ago, and I came up with some, what I thought were acceptable policies, and it went nowhere. It just, there were people that were friends with the outside renters, and it was just a lot going on. And but I did hand it off to Kyle. It's just something, a very, very high-level draft, and I don't know if you read it or not, but I sent you. And it was kind of a starting point. I wouldn't have a problem continuing on it and working with you a little bit and just making some suggestions as a draft, and then we can bring it to the council and then just talk about it. I don't know.
And I'd like to revise mine to basically echo what Vice Mayor had said, so I can send that back to Kyle as well.
Okay. Well, there's a couple of things then, and look at that, 9:04. Not bad. We have general
Kyle
business.
had another question.
Okay.
Well, I was just thinking, if we're talking in the immediate, if you guys could, I mean, you kind of said, you want the wait list, the residents that live here to get to the top. Also said that, you thought it was fair, more so in the order that they got on the list, determine their rank. So there are adjustments. I'll have to do some validation of the people who are the property owners on the top of the list to determine who is resident, who is not. But there are some immediate adjustments that I can make, because I do have all the dates that they got off the list, and I can determine that. So I'm just saying in the immediate future, so that we do move with something, like what your vision is.
Yeah, and I would be all for, even if we have to allow some non-residents in there, I would like to establish a time limit so the clock starts ticking and we can work. Then we know there's more slips that we'll get, so we open up.
Is there any distinguish between property owners and residents? If someone's saying, somebody owns Tampa, but they rent their place out here, are they a property owner, or is the person who rents their house here come ahead? Or are they on the same?
I think the mayor brought that up.
Yeah, the renter, as someone who rents here in Bel Air Beach, they should not be treated any different than someone who lives here and owns property in Bel Air Beach. I don't see.
How about the guy who owns the place that the renter is renting?
But he lives in
Are they treated the same?
Tampa? No.
They don't count?
No, I don't think that they should be, they should take priority just because they own the rental homes.
Do we have that situation going on?
Condos.
No.
We do have that situation, and then it makes me question, do we treat the renter who may only have a year lease different than the owner and resident?
If they actually made it through the list and then their lease went out the next year, it just opens up the slip again, but I wouldn't know follow it. I'm sure there's people here that have rented for years, and they just continue to live here in Bel Air Beach, and they pay, they don't pay property taxes, but they do everything else, and they contribute to our society.
Can I have one more comment?
All right, this is your last one.
Last thing I'm gonna say.
It's after 9 o'clock,
I hate to-
you
I hate
have
to
twice
push-
pizza, you know that, right?
I hate to push myself to the top of the list, but shouldn't the people that live here and own here and pay the taxes and bought the house and like I should be ahead of the guy that either lives here and rents or owns a house here and rents to someone else, or, I mean, I'm the guy paying the most money to be here. So shouldn't I get priority?
Absolutely.
That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Is there any way you can manipulate this thing and get it back to
Somewhere.
16? Anybody else that got it bumped? I mean,
What I want to do is go through the 29, I'll validate who's a resident, who lives here, owns the place, distinguish between that and a renter who doesn't own the place. I figure out where our numbers are and our property owners. And then I could rearrange the list.
Yeah, we can-
Based on that, we can look at where it is.
As long as it goes through now.
I don't foresee a slip opening in the next couple months because it's such a thing.
Right.
Unless he has little skinny boats that can fit
If
down.
one does, we'll be at a crisis.
Excuse me, guys, stay on track here just for about 2 more minutes. Do we have any other items we'd like to discuss on this? Going back to the marina right quick, and now we're at general business. I said 9 o'clock, it's 9:08.